June 11th, and this is Sue Madden for the Newport Historical Society, the Oral History Project, and the narrator, and this is tape number 1, the narrator is Pat Gilmore, and we are at his shop on
Roy Gilmore.
Roy. What I said, Pat? Roy Gilmore, and so we're going to begin, and I have a few questions that I'll start off with, basic questions. You were born where?
In Waltham, Massachusetts.
Waltham. Is that that's famous for clocks? Is that
Yes. My mother and father worked in the Waltham watch factory for a while.
Oh. Yeah. Are they either one of them living?
Yes, both are living.
They are. And your mother's name?
Agnes.
Agnes. And how old is she now?
Around 85.
Around 85. And your father?
Harry.
Harry. And he's
about 87.
87. They're in good health?
Basically, yeah. My mother's, fallen down a couple of times, but they live in Westford, Massachusetts, and out in the country there. And,
Now, were they born in this country?
Oh yeah. Well, my mother's Swedish, but she was born in this country.
Uh-huh.
And my father too. They were born in Springfield and Waltham, up that way.
Yeah. Well, is Waltham near? Is that near Springfield? I'm having trouble.
Waltham is a suburb of Boston.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I have trouble picturing where towns are. Now, did they both work in the that factory for a long time, or?
No, my father's a machinist. I think he worked there as a young man, and I think my mother worked there when she was very young.
You mean before they were married, or?
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah.
My grandmother, Clara Goldberg, came from Sweden, and she worked as a cook on several of the Newport estates.
Oh, did she?
That's how, I guess my mother came to Newport to visit her and things like that. Then my father moved to Newport around 1926. Should I keep going?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
He came here about 1926, and he worked at a place called the Cartoning Factory down on Commercial Wharf.
Oh.
And it was a factory that made machines, large machines for packaging, cork drops, razor blades.
Yeah.
It's gone now.
Yeah.
Well,
and where was it located again?
Commercial Wharf.
Yeah.
It's a condominium now.
Yeah.
There was a cigar factory there, and the lower half of the building was the cartoning factory.
Oh.
It was a pretty big affair, employed a lot of people. My father was there for a long time. He was the foreman.
All right, so that was 1926, and what year were you born?
22.
You were, okay.
I was about 3 years old when we came to Newport.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, we'll get into that more. Now, are you married?
Yes.
And your wife's name?
Betty.
Betty, okay. Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
Oh, yes, I have 4 brothers.
Yeah. Are any of them in Newport?
Well, there are 2 back in Rhode Island, but we've been all, separated, and my oldest brother's in Ocean City, Maryland.
Yeah. Oh, that's another resort area, right? Yeah.
And the next oldest is located now over at Snug Harbor. He's retired from Westinghouse. He was a nuclear engineer.
Oh.
He's retired now. He lives in Snug Harbor, over near Point Judith.
Right.
And the next brother, well, then there's me. Then the next brother is Eddie, and he's quite successful. He's been a manager for Sears for quite a while, and he's now the manager over at Warwick Mall.
Oh.
And then my youngest brother, Ralph, lives in Pepperell, Massachusetts, up near where my father lives. And he's self-employed as an electrician.
Oh. Any girls, or is
No.
that's the end? 5 boys?
Yes, there were 5 boys.
Now, how close together
Jack,
are
Harry,
you?
Roy, Eddie, and Ralph.
How close together are you? And
Well, Ralph is quite a bit younger. Ralph was born just as the war started,
huh,
so he's 40 something.
yeah. I think it was the President Eisenhower was one of 5 boys. So that's the only other time I can remember 5 boys in the family. Well, that's okay. So you're the only one who's in Newport, but
Still
there
in
are
Newport, yeah.
Okay. Now, in asking those questions, I've asked some that are on this sheet. When did your father retire? Do you remember? Let's see. He came here in
Well,
1926.
The 38, yeah, about 25, say.
Yeah.
I think he was working here a couple of years, and then my mother came down
I
from
see.
Waltham.
Okay.
The 38 hurricane flooded out the cartoning factory. All the machines were underwater.
Ah.
I remember spending hours cleaning up his tools and helping him to oil
Yeah.
and things. But it reopened for a short while. Then the cartoning factory moved to upstate Massachusetts, and my father decided not to go.
But that job, was that the first job he had in Newport that you know of, or did he?
Oh yes, he spent all his younger years up in Whitensville, Massachusetts, in a machine shop. He worked in a place called the Bucko Factory, and he'd work for a while. If he didn't like it, he'd quit and go to another job and things like that. But the cartoning factory he stayed there till shortly after the hurricane, probably 1940. And I think he went to the Boston Navy Yard and worked for a while. Then he got transferred to the torpedo station, and the torpedo station closed down.
What year was that closed? Was that
46, 47,
46,
right after
yeah.
the war. So,
And then did he retire at that
no, not
point?
really. He moved back up to Waltham and worked in a place up there for a while, and retired from there. What year I
Yeah.
don't know.
Now, his parents were born where? Were they born here, or?
I talked to my father not too long ago. Ralph was there visiting him, and Ralph wanted to find out some questions for his son's teacher in school in Pepperell. And so he told us that, well, I basically knew this. My father's mother was born in Mason, New Hampshire, and her name was Weston. My middle name is Weston.
Oh.
And his father was the superintendent in the Waltham Watch Factory. That would be my grandfather.
Yeah.
Mason, New Hampshire is where my father's mother came from.
Okay. And his father?
Was, as far as I know, was from Waltham.
Yeah.
But my father's uncle had a farm up in Ashby, where my father used to spend his summer, and Ashby is fairly close to the border, so I guess he met Mabel in Mason, New Hampshire. And my father has an uncle that's still alive.
Is that right? So he must be, what, in his...
He must be close to 100 by now. Not too long ago, he used to play golf, but now
He slowed down a little bit.
He used to spend all his winters down in Florida. Now, as far as I know, he's in a home, but...
Well, it sounds like you've got good genes in your family, and you'll be fishing for a long time. Now, you mentioned that one job that your mother had when you were here in, when she came down to Newport. Did she work here?
No.
No.
Her mother did.
Her mother did. And
worked on the estates as a cook.
Oh.
She worked at Grosvenor's and... should I continue?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is very...
Well, I remember going with my mother as a young boy to some of the estates. And visiting. And had to go in the service entrance.
That was going to be my next question.
And go in the kitchen and be quiet.
Yeah.
And my grandmother worked so hard. Over a hot stove, cooking for the rich people with, a meager salary, I would say. And grandmother worked awful hard. But I remember going to some of these places and getting a glass of milk and some cookies or things like that.
Now, did she have any fringe benefits in terms of being able to take food home that was left over, or?
Possibly, but I can't recall
Yeah.
that. I think my grandmother worked, my grandmother lived on Connection Street. This is a long time ago, in a small house. Well, the Fifth Ward in those days, the houses were not as nice as they are now. The same houses probably, but they were, you know, people might have chickens in the backyards and things like that. My grandmother lived on Connection Street. I remember going there. Then she moved to Stockholm Street. And she moved to Perry Street just before the war for a short while. Then she lived on Anthony Street, which is right up here, for quite a while. Then eventually she went with my aunt in Princeton, New Jersey, where she died.
Now, did she have to work? Or
Well,
do you think she wanted
yeah,
to?
I would say so. She had to work until she was quite old, no.
Now, what had happened to her husband?
He died in Sweden long ago.
Oh.
When she came to this country, she was young, I imagine, and she was a widow.
Yeah. And so was your mother the only one of her children?
No, there was a sister, Helen, who lives now in Princeton, New Jersey.
Oh. Well, so she had a difficult time then.
Yes,
in
I
terms
would say
of,
so. Yeah.
What kind of hours did she work? Do you think? Did she have to do
Oh,
all
yeah.
3 meals, or?
In those days, in the late 30s and 40s, people that worked on these estates, their salary was like $25 a week. And the superintendents of some of these estates were very strict. There wasn't any goofing off or anything. People had to work hard.
So the superintendents were like in a class between the owners and the
Yes.
and the
Yeah,
doers.
the superintendent,
Yeah.
you know, ran the estate. If it was a large one like Duke's or the Marble
Yeah.
House and things like that.
Well, I know in talking with Mr. Collins, he had worked on some of the estates too, and he had phenomenal memory for figures and quoted, wages, and just unbelievable.
$25 a week
Yeah.
was a lot, you know. And you could be laid off at any time, or I don't think there was any retirement. What did some of the rich people give to people that finished 30, 20 years of service on their estate? Nothing, probably.
Yeah.
The only one I can recall is the Curtis James estate. When he died, everybody that was working there at the time of his death, I think it was $1,000 for every year that they had worked there. So,
So if some people could have put
somebody
in
that worked in the garden, say,
Yeah.
for 20 years, if he stayed that long, he was there when he died, he got $20,000
Yeah.
in 1938 or somewhere around there. It was, a tremendous amount of money.
So now, was your father's salary fairly good, and that's why your
Yes,
mother didn't
I
have
would
to?
say that during the Depression years, my father worked right through the Depression.
Yeah.
You know. So, well, I would say probably average with other people.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are out of work in those days.
Let me see. We went into your brothers and sisters. When you were kids growing up, were you boys expected to do work in the house or outside the house for your spending money, or did you have to look after each other, or did you, what kind of?
I remember my brother Harry had a paper route. I used to help him sometimes on Saturdays on his collection day.
Yeah.
And we had coal and wood stoves, and there was always bringing coal up and things like that, or going to the store, going down to get ice, taking the wagon and going down to the same ice house that's there now. When you get a 25-cent piece of ice and haul it home.
This was on a little wagon that you pull? Yeah.
Going down to the gas company to get a bag of Coke.
Yeah.
We ran coal and mostly coal and Coke. Well, errands like going to the store and things like that. We
So
all-
was it any different than what other kids were expected to do, or?
Oh, I would say all young boys
Yeah.
at that time, if they had a paper route, or I would say they had to help out around the
Yeah.
house.
Okay. What do you remember as you were growing up? What the family might do together? You know, all seven of you. Would there be family activities, or was everyone sort of going in different directions? Or?
Well, all my brothers and myself took to the outdoors, fishing and hunting. And my father went hunting when he first came to Newport.
Uh-huh.
And that occupied most of our time. As soon as we came home from school, it was, if something was to be done around the house,
Yeah.
as soon as we could get the fishing rod and go down the Lily Pond,
Which pond?
the Lily Pond,
Oh, okay.
we lived at the end of Old Fort Road, which was a lot different then than it is now.
Uh-huh.
And it was camping, going over in the woods, we call it the hills.
Yeah.
And over by the old quarry, and bring a lunch, look for snakes or something like that. We were outdoors a lot, my brothers and I.
Yeah. Did the family ever go away together?
Oh yes, I remember going up to visit my grandfather in Waltham. That was a long ordeal.
I
mean,
bet.
You get in the car with the kids fighting in the back, you know, and you better cut it out, and getting lost, and going
Yeah.
up through Fall River, and down by the coal yards, over the bridge by Swansea, and then all those little towns, Raynham and Dedham and Stoughton. It was an ordeal to get from Newport to Waltham.
Yeah.
And
How long would that take?
probably about 4 hours to
Sure,
get there.
yeah.
Maybe even longer if we
Yeah.
got lost. But,
Now, would you stay for a
or
couple
we would
of
stay
days?
overnight,
Yeah.
or a
Huh.
weekend maybe.
Yeah.
People didn't get much time off in those days.
Yeah.
My father, I don't know if he had a real vacation. It was just weekends or a holiday.
Well, yeah. When I was a teenager and I worked in the hospital in those days, you worked Saturday morning. I mean, you worked a 5.5-day week. There were no.
At Newport
Yeah.
Hospital?
No, this was in Cleveland where I grew up. But you didn't have a full 2-day weekend the way you do now.
And there were no. It was a 3-day holiday. It was just by chance.
Yeah.
Memorial Day was a Monday then, or a Friday,
Yeah.
and we were all set.
Right.
We used to go around the drive quite often.
I mean,
for a
the
ride.
family.
Well, a few of the boys, my
Yeah.
mother and father and the dog, and get some water from the spring over by the graves over there.
No, where is that?
Well, there was a spring up in the woods there near the Taylor Golf Course. And I don't know.
Now, does that golf course still exist, or?
The Thomas T. Taylor course, basically, I think the country club might have taken over
Oh.
some of it, and the rest is probably lots.
Uh-huh.
And there was a point there with 2 graves on it. Everybody in Newport knows about that. I guess the 38 hurricane washed them out.
Oh. Whose graves were they?
Well, they were just unknown seamen that washed up on the shore.
Oh.
And there was 2 little graves on the ocean side of the Ocean Drive, just
Yeah.
before you get to Budlong's. And there were flags on them. A lot of people would stop and look at them.
Huh.
And I'm pretty sure that the 38 hurricane just
Yeah.
washed away part of the wall and the graves.
Would this be a Sunday afternoon
Or probably
activity?
be after work in the summer.
Yeah.
Summer's evening drive,
Yeah.
go around the drive, get some water.
Yeah.
And I can recall going out to 2 Mile Corner sometimes in the summer. It was all farms, all country, and it was always a real adventure to go to Dutchland Farms and get an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And Dutchland Farms was one of the few things there. It was next to Ann's Kitchen, might have been there. Dutchland Farm, it had a replica of a windmill, and they had quite a variety of ice cream, and that was a big thing to drive out there and pick what flavor of ice cream
Yeah.
you wanted for each sign. My mother would win, I guess, and bring back these cones. But 2 Mile Corner was all country. The Anchorage, none of that stuff's there.
Yeah.
Sears, it was all nurseries and farms.
Good. When you were growing up, did anyone live with you other than your immediate family?
No.
Or any renters or
No.
family or
No.
anyone?
First we lived on Hammond Street. That's the first thing I can recall. We lived in a three-family house. We lived on the ground floor. And when I was just before I started high school, it could have been around 1935, I was going to Cary School. And we moved down to Old Fort Road, the last house on Old Fort Road. It was all fields, and it was great for all us boys. We were right there. We just got out the back door, and we had chickens. Might shoot a rat out the window. They come out in the chicken yard. It was just what we wanted, you know.
Yeah, did you stay there? Did your family stay there for quite a while?
Yes, quite a while, till the war. Just before the war, we moved down the road a ways. Ernest Leo built some cottages there around 1939, and we moved into a brand new house, which we rented. And it was just a short ways down. Old Fort Road was a dirt road, that portion of it at that time. And that was even closer to the Lily Pond. And it was camping down, sometimes in the summer. Probably should have been working, but some of my friends and I would, of my own age, would bring tents and set them up on Hazard's Beach and stay there for maybe a month, come home once in a while.
Is that right?
Go out in boats, maybe get a few lobsters, and just kids, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds
Still
terrific.
no fences in those days.
What about organizations? Did you kids tend to do things on your own rather than, say, through the Boy Scouts or some?
My brother Harry was in the Boy Scouts. My brother Frank, I don't think he...
Well, I guess my question is, did you tend to make up your own activities, or were you guided, you know, by some counselor in an organization?
No, it was just on our own, whatever we did. Either I'd go with Frank or Harry and go over the creeks fishing with perch, or down the Lily Pond, and as soon as I was old enough to have a gun, why then I was shooting down by the creeks. And in those days, you could shoot guns. And I think it was good, as long as you were careful.
So your father was interested in these activities too, in terms of being outdoors?
When he first came to Newport, he used to go hunting by Lawton's Valley and places like that. But then, after that, he didn't. But he did an awful lot of fishing.
Yeah.
He did a lot of saltwater fishing. He used to catch a lot of blackfish, and during the Depression, that was our mainstay, blackfish chowder.
You like it today, or you?
I know we had a lot of it.
What about, did you ever have a boat?
We always had some kind of a skiff down the pond.
Yeah. What about swimming?
Oh, we always went swimming. Mostly down Hazard's Beach.
Yeah. So your orientation was in that direction rather than going down by the harbor.
Well, no, we used to spend time down Kings Park.
Yeah.
Down the docks, walk the docks. Sometimes we'd swim. We'd go to Fort Adams a lot, mackerel fishing in the summer. I remember my brother Harry and I walking over there day in and day out in the summer, catching mackerel.
And then what would you do with it?
A lot of times we'd bring a string of mackerel. I remember Harry and I, we used to hide our mackerel poles in the back of the wall going down the hill towards Fort Adams. And a lot of times we sold the fish just walking home. Cars would stop and ask us, you know, what kind of fish are they? I remember selling them.
Yeah. What about clamming, or did you ever get into that?
We used to go to Cohoggen, go to Green Bridge, get a few cohogs and make a chowder. Well, there were a lot of youngsters did Cohoggen right down in Kings Park, right in the harbor. It wasn't off limits in those days, and there were an awful lot of cohogs out by the Spindle or over by Ida Lewis.
What about the movies? Did you ever go to the movies?
Yes, the movies. That was something to do. If we'd have to ask Pa, you know, can we go to the movies? It was either a dime or 15 cents. That was a great thing to go to the movies. I remember going to the Paramount Theater.
Now, where was that?
Right across from City Hall.
Oh, okay.
Going there on a Saturday afternoon, waiting in line for half, 3/4 of an hour, maybe longer, and getting in the Paramount Theater with my brothers and going upstairs in the balcony and sitting down. Maybe probably a half an hour or more before the picture even started. Just sitting there waiting. And finally, on a Saturday afternoon, the lights dimmed down, and all those kids started yelling and howling and screaming, "Yay!" The picture. But I remember some good films like Trader Horn with the jungle and all that. It was a great thing to go to the movies. We used to go to the Colonial. That was down on Thames Street. In fact, I worked there as an usher for a while, just before the war.
Did any
Colonial Theater had vaudeville.
Oh yeah, that was going to be my question. Did any of these theaters have, live entertainment?
Well, the Colonial did.
Yeah.
Colonial had a vaudeville show. It was probably on the weekends or something.
Yeah.
And there was always some kind of a serial going on in the movies. Would be Buck Rogers or something like that. Each week would be another installment. A lot of Western pictures they had.
Yeah.
And they used to have free dish night. You go and 15 cents to get in. And whether you took a chance or bought a ticket or saved a coupon, then you could, maybe get a set of dishes if you had enough times. And there was the Bijou Theater. I never went there. I was a little bit too young. My brothers went there. That was near Mill Street, somewhere around there. Bijou. I remember seeing the sign. And then there was the Strand in the Opera House. I remember going to see King Kong as a young kid.
Yeah.
Boy, I remember that night when I got home, I was so scared. My mother told me to go out and lock up for the chickens. Wow. Well, I made one dash out to that chicken house, put the lock on the door and looked around. I thought King Kong was out in the woods there.
Yeah.
It really, really frightened me. And Frankenstein, some of those pictures.
So now, how did you get around? Did you walk?
Walk, oh yeah. Everybody walked. Who would have a car in those days?
Well, I mean, I didn't know if you might have a bicycle or
roller bicycles,
skates.
yes, bicycles.
So would you use these to get around, like, or was it?
Yes, we'd take a bike, but not if we went to the movies. Where would you put the bike?
Yeah.
No, we'd walk up. Oh, and another beach we used to go to would be Easton's Beach, as a family, my mother. A lot of times during the summer it was from Hammond Street, with a little wagon and a lunch.
How you doing?
Wagon and lunch, yeah.
And going up Dixon Street, watching the bell on the tower there at one of the estates. There was a tower with a bell and a clock, and we had to watch the bell, the hand hit the bell at the hour or something. Then walking down Parker Avenue, all fields with flowers, daisies and grass and things like that. And then down Annandale Road and down to Easton's Beach.
And that's when they had a lot of
That's when the roller
amusements
coaster was there, and the merry-go-round. Well, that was another thing to do in the evening in the summer. Go down to Easton's Beach. My father liked to go down there and just sit and watch the merry-go-round. Listen to music and, it was a nickel for a ride or something. I remember riding on it an awful lot on the merry-go-round. It was a large affair, very nice one. Wound up in, as everybody knows, I wound up in the Easton's Pond after the 38th hurricane.
Right.
They had a roller coaster. They had a pool down there called the Roman pools. And
Now this was what, a bathing
it
sort
was
of
a
thing?
swimming pool
Yeah, okay.
with diving boards and things. And I remember asking the old man for 35 cents to go to the Roman pools to go swimming. What the hell do you want 35 cents? You got the whole ocean to swim in. You want to go to the Roman pools.
So was Newport a good place to grow up in, do you think?
Oh yes, I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, sure sounds like it. What about your future, you and your brothers? Did your parents have any expectations for you, or did they give you any guidance, or was it just sort of...
No, I guess they were satisfied if you graduated from high school, wasn't it? Oh, not in our family. Nobody went to college. The war changed everything
Sure.
anyway. But nobody expected to go to college. The average Fifth Ward family.
What about careers? Were there a lot of opportunities, or this was at the end of the Depression, though, so
Yes.
there probably weren't.
Well, the big thing in Newport at that time was the Naval Torpedo Station.
Yeah.
My brother Frank, after he got out of high school, was an apprentice over there. Took a great job. And a lot of young people in Newport, that's about all they thought about was, I'll be like my father, go to the torpedo station. It's going to go on forever, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It closed it after the war.
Well, as I understand it, one of the problems with the estates is that
The wages were very bad.
And
So with
with the war,
and the
government employment opportunity, people went
to work for the government,
because
you got
better wages, and
and
that
that
helped
the decline
decline of
the summer colony.
Yeah.
Is that
your
perception of?
Some people say the income tax
Yeah.
cut down a lot on the rich people. Just didn't want so much help on their prices. They didn't keep them up that good. But a lot of people, of course, I guess everybody at that time kind of knew there was going to be a war. The way the Navy started bringing more and more ships in,
Yeah.
painting them camouflage colors and all that. So a lot of people went to work, not only at the torpedo station, but probably at the naval base.
Now, in terms of you personally, when did you finish school?
I graduated in 1939 from Rogers High School.
I say you graduated from Rogers High School,
39.
39.
And, I worked, I was always interested in woodworking, and I worked as a carpenter for a while. And then I worked with my brother Harry with a small construction company. And not wanting to be drafted, I walked over to Fort Adams one day and enlisted in the Army.
Oh,
And that ended working for here for a while.
so now when was that? In 1940
In
or
42.
42?
In the winter of 40, in December 1942, I enlisted.
Okay, so the war had been on
My
for
brother,
1 year then?
yes, just
And you were what, about 19 then? 20?
19, I guess. My brother Harry joined the Naval Reserves, and he used to go to meetings a couple of times a week. And I think it was in the fall of 1940, he was called into active service.
Now he was living at home at the time?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. You were all living at home?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, well, my oldest brother, Frank, he married around 1939 or so. So he
Yeah.
had moved to Paradise Avenue.
Now how come your orientation was to the Army, do you think, when you were living in a Navy town? Is that... Did other people go, anyone you know, go with you when you,
No, I didn't want to be drafted.
you mean you want,
I just felt that,
you would have more control over what happened
yeah,
to you?
basically.
Yeah. Now, did you have to get permission from your parents, or you were old enough
No.
so you could?
I just walked over to Fort Adams one day and enlisted, and 3 days later I left.
And where did they send you?
Oh, well, I was in the States for a while, and everybody went to Fort Devens. 15
Oh,
miles.
now that's up near Boston, right?
Fort Devens is up near Air.
Okay.
Most all draftees went to Fort Devens. Is this part of?
Yeah, sure.
Everybody went to Fort Devens, and you stayed there for maybe 1 week or maybe a month, and then you would be shipped out. And in my case, I went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and wound up in anti-aircraft unit, 40 millimeters, and from there to Oregon, and finally over to the Pacific.
Huh.
My brother Harry was on battleship New Mexico all through the war.
And all the boys came out all right in terms of the World War II?
Yes. My brother Eddie, and he went in the Army just before the war was over, and he was in the Air Corps, and I know he went to Japan. So there were 3 of us in the armed services. And later on, my brother Ralph went in the Navy, and he was in Vietnam on a cruiser. So 4 of us were in the service.
Yeah. To back up a little bit, where did you get your exposure to carpentry?
Well, in
Or
high
woodworking?
school, there again, a lot of boys that I knew sort of took up the vocational course, where you went to different shops.
You mean, did they have the vocational and the academic, and you were sort of went one direction or the other? And
I guess they gave you some guidance when you first went in high school, but it seemed like the best thing to do unless you had hopes of going to college. It seemed like the vocational course was the best.
Yeah.
And you could...
Because you learned a skill.
Yes, and you could be... they have automotive mechanics, printing, woodworking, and machine shop. So you picked one of those, or maybe they helped you pick it, and you spent the rest, for 3 years you were in one of the shops.
Do you think your father's job had anything, I mean, did he give you any?
He didn't
Did you
want
get
any
any-
of us to be a machinist.
Yeah.
My brother Harry worked at the cottoning factory for a while before he went in the Navy. That's where he was working.
Uh-huh.
And my father didn't think machinist was a very good trade.
But he did pretty well
Yes.
at it, didn't he?
Yes.
Maybe the field was changing at the time, or do you think, was there more automation coming in then? Or?
He just thought that it was kind of hard work, and the pay wasn't that good.
Yeah. Oh, did you think when you started this in high school that it would be your life's work? Or
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. I would say that the war changed everything, and you thought maybe, well, if I get back home, I don't know what I'm going to do, which is true. I didn't
Yeah.
know what to do. I'll get out of the army.
Let's back up a little bit. I suddenly got you through high school, and we never did anything about grammar school. You mentioned you went to the Carey School.
Yes, I went to Carey School.
Yeah. Was that up till the 6th grade there, or 8th grade?
7th.
7th grade.
And then there was, the 8th grade was separated, and that was at John Clark School on Mary Street.
Oh, okay.
And then we went into 4 years, went to high school from the 8th grade, which would be at Rogers High School
Yeah.
on Broadway.
Okay. These questions on education are don't look too special to me. Is there anything about your days in school in terms of the teachers you had, or any special experiences that you had that made a big impression on you, do you think?
Well, I guess there was a vast difference between students and teachers when I was going to school than there are today. I mean, nobody that I know would ever think of assaulting a teacher or even talking back to a teacher. They just didn't stand for that. If you did something like that, there's a good chance you would be expelled. Well, it was just you'd be afraid of what your parents would say. It never entered your mind to answer a teacher back,
Right.
or solve a reality question. Of course, drinking and drugs were unknown, and at least amongst my classmates.
Speaking of that kind of problem, or discipline in general, were your folks pretty strict?
Yes. We had to go to Sunday school at the Swedish church up on Cornet Street. And
Corner of where?
Cornet Street.
Oh, okay.
And I would say my father was quite strict.
So you kids stayed in line.
Yes, we did.
What kind of discipline did your parents use, if it was necessary?
No, it was just mostly yelling. I guess it was just my father would, be mad. Might have got whacked with his belt once in a while when we were young kids.
Yeah. And what about your mother? Was she strict, or did she leave that to your...
Well, she would
Threaten to
threaten
tell your
that-
father?
Yeah, she would be the go-between. As soon as the old man came home from work, Roy did this or Harry did that.
Yeah.
It would be dealt with by my father. Like skipping school, might get caught. get a lecture.
Now, is that something you did very often?
Oh, once in a while. Down the freight yard and watch the trains.
Yeah.
Walk around the cliffs, down by the tea house. Go swimming maybe down the lily pond in the woods. And hope you didn't get caught by the truant officer.
Yeah. Now they call them, what, attendance officers or something crazy like that. You mentioned going to Sunday school. Did you go to a regular church service afterwards too, or?
Not usually. When we were older, we might, but Sunday school was it every Sunday morning.
And this was the Swedish church.
Yeah.
How was that different from? No, is that the same as is it called Swendenborgen or something like that? So I have a problem because I don't know what the Swedish church is. That's.
Oh, it was at that time it was called the Zion Lutheran Church.
Oh.
And
Okay.
the same church today is St. Peter's Lutheran Church.
Oh, all right. So the Lutheran Church is where, was there a big Swedish community here in?
No, I wouldn't say it was big, but it was only a small church.
Yeah. Were most of the people who went to it of Swedish
Yes,
background?
yes.
Okay. How many families do you think went to that church?
Gee, I don't know. I couldn't answer that.
Yeah. Were religious holidays very special with
Well,
this
it was
church?
always Christmas,
Christmas?
getting some kind of gifts.
Yeah.
In the Depression, there weren't many gifts.
Yeah,
But now, as young kids, we all look forward to Christmas.
yeah. Was this a big thing in your church?
Well, they would have the Christmas Eve service
Uh-huh.
around. I remember going to that as a young boy, midnight or whatever it was,
Yeah.
walking up there in the cold.
There are quite a few questions about the neighborhood. Now you moved. Did you consider yourself a Fifth Warder?
Yes, living on Hammond Street we were.
And what about when you moved to some of the other streets that you
Well,
mentioned?
we were even deeper in the Fifth Ward then.
Okay. So you were in the same neighborhood when you were growing up.
Yes.
And what was special about that neighborhood as compared to other neighborhoods?
Well, the North End was, I know, different people. Might have some school friends that lived there.
Yeah.
And the Point was a separate area.
Now, the Point had, was it Irish? Were there a lot of Irish in the Point?
I don't think there was. I think there was Irish all over the city.
Oh, okay.
But in the Fifth Ward, there were a lot of Irish families.
You know, I get the feeling from the people that I've talked to that the neighborhoods were really quite distinct, and people felt like, you know, they came from the Point or the North End or the Fifth Ward, but I really can't get a feeling of how they were different or, you know, what made them so distinct.
Just that it was a separate part of the town.
Was there any competition in terms of, you know, we're better or you're not as good as we are?
Well, yeah,
because-
we might joke about it. Or he's from the Point, or
Yeah,
he's in North End. We might have had small baseball teams and maybe going over the Richmond lot, and boys from other parts of town would come down and
Yeah.
play baseball.
was there any, you know, like, well, gangs makes it sound a little strong, but were there sort of, like in your playing, that you were expected to stay within a certain neighborhood, and if you went into another neighborhood, you were going on to someone else's turf or territory?
That could have happened. Some boy in another section of town might pick on a stranger, if, you know. But there were enough tough guys that, you know, I remember getting beat up several times right down in the Fifth Ward by some of the older, tougher boys.
Yeah. You think this is the normal rights of childhood and growing up?
Yeah,
And
it used to be.
yeah. What about one's ethnic background? Was there a big distinction of, you know, you're Portuguese or he's Irish or he's...
Yes, there was, but I'd rather not, no, I'd rather not say anything
Okay.
about that. It was there, but
And was there much play with kids in your immediate neighborhood, or did your friends tend, and the things you did tend to come from the kids who were in your class at school, or your brothers, or did it just...
oh yeah, it seemed like it almost went street by street. The Hammond Street boys,
Uh-huh.
might not be too familiar with, say, some of the boys from Lee Avenue. It was quite close. Immediate neighbors would be friends.
Uh-huh. What about with your brothers? Were they enough older or younger than you that you tended to have your own friends? Or you mentioned you did do some things with them, but...
Yes, but they may not take me all the time. My
Yeah.
two older brothers would go someplace, and I'd be too young to go. That
Not that
happened.
you didn't want to go, but that they, you know...
They just didn't want to be bothered with me, maybe.
Yeah.
They were going to... Well, I remember them going over to Saunderstown, and I didn't go, but that was a big trip. I guess my mother let them go down the
How, by
down the
ferry?
Jamestown ferry.
Yeah.
Cross Jamestown on foot, and then take the Saunderstown ferry over to Saunderstown.
Yeah.
I never rode on the Saunderstown ferry, but that was another thing to do in the summer, to get on my mother, my grandmother, my brothers, make a lunch, sandwiches, walk uptown to Market Square. I think that's what the name it was. Get on the ferry, usually it was a governor car,
Yeah.
riding over to Jamestown, and right near the ferry, just north of the ferry, there was a sand beach still there today, but it wasn't used that much, and it was a place to spend the whole day, go swimming,
Uh-huh.
and have our lunch, and then get on the ferry and come back home. That was a nice trip. I remember several of them. I know there's a lot of old photographs, and my mother has, of pictures taken on the governor car.
Oh,
My
really?
grandmother, my father,
Yeah.
and the kids.
So once you were in Jamestown, did you tended to stay right near, you know, within
Yes.
walking distance of the ferry?
A lot
then?
of people went to Jamestown for blueberries.
Oh.
They walked up, I think it was a little bit of a walk. I remember going a couple of times. Some pastures up in the center of the island where there was field with blueberry bushes, and was taking buckets and things and picking blueberries and then going back to the ferry.
What about poison ivy? You've got so
Oh,
much
yeah,
poison
yeah.
ivy over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Oh, you're from Jamestown.
Yeah.
Maybe you know where it was. Jamestown was, was very quiet in those days.
It was, compared to Newport, it still is, but, well, we'll get into some more of that later. With your neighbors, did they celebrate, do you remember celebrating holidays in any special way?
Well, the
or-
4th of July was a great thing. Any kid could, well, you had to be maybe 10 years old or more, but any boy could go in the drugstores or any place and buy firecrackers and
Yeah.
Roman candles and skyrockets. And that was a big thing. Started a couple of days before, shooting off firecrackers
Yeah.
all over town, all over the Fifth Ward.
Was there any person in your neighborhood who made a big impression on you, either positively or negatively, in terms of being a very special person, or
Some boys were outstanding athletes, golf, basketball.
uh-huh.
I can't recall their names, but yeah.
Were there any older people who sort of served as, I guess the term now is like a role model, but you know, you wanted to be like whomever, or
In my case, it would probably be somebody that was a good shot, or did a lot of hunting or
Yeah.
fishing.
What
I never
about what about your instructors in school? Were there any outstanding teachers that you had that helped you along personally, or?
Probably not to any great extent
Yeah.
that I can recall now.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned your wife. When did you meet her?
When through the service, when I was stationed near Chicago, I met
Uh-huh.
her in Chicago.
Oh. At a USO kind of a...
No, just a date that I met.
Uh-huh. Okay. And then when did you get married?
Well, when I came back to Newport,
Now this would have been what?
1946.
Six? Right.
I stayed around Newport for a little while, did some fishing, and then I went back out to Chicago and worked out there
Uh-huh.
as an apprentice. And maybe 3 years later, moved back to Newport.
Okay, so when you first got married, you lived in the...
I lived in Chicago. I was married in Chicago.
And do you have any children?
Yes, I have 2 boys.
2 boys, okay. And where were they born?
Both of them were born in Newport.
Okay. Now, were they born in a hospital, or?
Yes.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you about you and your brothers. Do you know, were you born in hospitals or at home?
I think my brother Eddie was born at home on Hammond Street.
That was the way it was done in those days?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how close together are your boys? Are they fairly close in age?
In age?
Yeah.
Within 2 years, maybe.
More than 2 years.
Yeah.
Did your wife have any help when they were very young in terms of raising them, or like your parents were here at the time?
They lived in Newport, yes.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't say there was any special
Okay.
help.
Now, has your wife worked at all over the years?
She worked in Chicago in a hospital.
Oh. And are your boys in Newport now, or are
Yes. My youngest son is married. He lives out, he's a North Ender. And the oldest boy still lives at home.
Oh.
He works for the city.
And what about your younger son? What does he do?
He's self-employed.
Oh, okay. Do you have any grandchildren? Or?
No.
Okay. In terms of the neighborhood, there's a lot of emphasis in terms of the question on the neighborhood. I guess from what you've said, you've lived in the Fifth Ward area all. When you came back from Chicago, did you come back to the Fifth Ward neighborhood?
No. My parents, evidently they had to move from Old Fort Road. They moved out to one of the projects out by Miami Park.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I first moved to when I first came back to Newport for a while. A lot of my friends lived there. One of my brothers lived there for a while at Townby Housing Project
Uh-huh.
to get started.
Uh-huh.
It was nice there at that time.
Well, housing was a big problem, wasn't it,
Yeah.
after
Yes,
the
because the
war?
Navy was, the Navy was here, and
And there are a lot of people who came out of the service, and everyone was looking for a house at the
Yeah.
same time. All the discharged people. So then eventually how long have you been in this neighborhood now, in terms of, like, you mentioned you live on Terry Street.
we moved from the project down to Carroll Avenue for a while. And then we lived in back of where I had my shop, right back there, for a while. And then we bought the house on Carey Street about 10 years ago.
But you've kind of,
Yeah, I moved around,
but in this,
basically in the Fifth Ward.
yeah. You mentioned that the houses look nicer now than you remember they looked when you were a kid.
Yes.
What other kinds of things do you remember as being very different from then as it is now, this neighborhood?
Well, stores would be one thing. There was a lot of small neighborhood stores, bakeries. Right down on Lower Thames Street, there was probably 4 or 5 or 6 small neighborhood stores that carried cold cuts and meat and canned vegetables.
The mom and pop kind of
Yes.
store?
Yes.
What did those stores in, do you think? Was it the supermarkets?
Well, I guess the supermarket was the cause of their leaving those stores.
So you would do your shopping locally in terms of for food?
Yes, that's all it was.
Yeah.
Well, there was one larger store that I remember my mother did a lot of shopping with, would be Eddie's Market, which would be uptown.
Was that on Thames Street?
Yes, that was right at the head of where you went down to get the ferry.
Oh,
James
okay.
A. Eddie Market, everybody knew about that.
Yeah.
And that was a much larger store, and my mother would either go there or call up on the phone and order. It would probably be less expensive to shop at Eddie's than it would be
Yeah.
at a small
Yeah.
local store. But it still wasn't a supermarket, Eddie's Market, but
Yeah.
it was quite large.
Now, you mentioned the cartoning factory. Were there a lot of other businesses or factories like that down on the waterfront?
Oh, the waterfront was coal companies, small independent fishermen, some of the trap boats, small machine shops down some of the wharfs, or just, well, there were several shipyards, small shipyards. It seemed to be there were several empty lots here and there on some of the docks.
So I understand there were a lot of wharves too that went way out into the water.
Yes. From Kings Park, from the old gas company right up to JT's was all different wharfs. that went out.
Now this was when JT was on Long Wharf?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was commercial in those days
Yes, it
rather
was.
than.
And you could walk down almost any one of the wharfs, and either fish or just walk around.
Yeah. It sure is different today.
And the gas company was a big affair down, on Wellington Avenue, on Thames Street.
Did that employ a lot of people?
I don't know about a lot of people, but it was a pretty big affair.
Yeah.
What did they do? They burned coal to make gas for household use.
Gee, we covered a lot. What about your children? Now, where did they play? How was their childhood play different from your own?
Well, when they were very young, we lived out the project, and That wasn't too bad when it was first, when we first lived there. They had neighbors' children to play with and things. And then, I can't recall where they went to. Oh, I guess they went to the Sullivan School, which was out that way. And then when we moved down to Carroll Avenue, they went to Carey School, same place I went to. And Rogers.
So I guess the sense of openness, I mean, it sounds, from what you described, you know, there were a lot of open fields and so forth that...
Oh, it was beginning to disappear then.
Yeah.
Say in the 60s probably. Certain wharfs would disappear, houses, you know, new construction would go up here and there. Gradually became more and more.
When you were growing up in your neighborhood, do you think people were similar to each other in terms of their life experiences and their income and jobs, and that it was, even though the ethnic backgrounds might have been different, it was homogeneous in terms of the kinds of interests that people had and the kinds of things they did?
Well, one way of answering that, I guess, would be on the street that you lived, there would be a lot of playmates that would be more or less in the same class as, let's say, my family was. That they had to ask their father for money to go to the theater or something, but as always, there was some affluent.
Some people you could tell were more affluent.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, their car might be a lot better. They would have more candy bars and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, one of the reasons that there's so many questions about the neighborhood is that I think there's a feeling that maybe there's less of a community feeling today than there was at the time when you were growing up.
It seemed like you knew all, talking about Hammond Street, it seemed like the same people lived there for years and years, and you knew all their names and their daughters and sons, and it seemed like the same family stayed there for a long time. There wasn't much moving around maybe in those days.
Well, I guess that was one of the major changes after World War II, I guess, was the mobility. Do you, and you know, in the street, you live on Carey Street now, do you have a sense that you know a lot of the people that live there, or people just...
I know them to see, but to be honest, there's several families on Carey Street that I don't even know their names. The ones that I do are people that I knew years ago. That might still live there.
Yeah. They're like the Chamber of Commerce or something.
No, they may ask about some upholsterer, or he had a bellows for a fireplace, and the leather was, he needs to have new leather put on it, so that's the only one I can think of was Friend's Leather.
When you were growing up, what did you like most about your neighborhood? Whichever one, you know. Well, let's say about the Fifth Ward. What did you like about living in the Fifth Ward the most?
Well, I guess it was Hammond Street was all right, but it seemed like as soon as we moved to Old Fort Road, it was a lot better because it was more in the country.
Yeah.
Some boys like the city, I guess, and other boys like the outdoors. So Hammond Street seemed like an average street in Newport.
Okay, what about, well, we went a little bit into organizations, and you and your friends, when you were growing up, did not join organizations in particular. What about your parents, other than the church? Were there any civic organizations that they were active in, or
I would say no.
was any community involvement was primarily through the church, or?
I can't recall my father
Yeah.
belonged to.
Were they active in politics at all? And
Well, just the usual discussion at the table about
Yeah.
who was running for president, Hoover or Al Smith, and things like that.
yeah,
Uh, there was always an interest in it.
yeah.
I mean, my father seemed to be interested in who was going to be elected.
But local politics, there was.
It was just who was going to be mayor, I guess,
Yeah.
in those days.
What about state politics? Yeah. Did you really feel? I don't want to phrase this so that Did you have the sense that you were living on an island?
Maybe a little bit, but the ferry might have made some difference, and it was either the ferry or the Mount Hope Bridge was the only way off the island,
Mhm.
so you had some sense of being on an island.
Did you feel like you were part of Rhode Island, or you were this, or you were Newport? You were from
Yeah,
Newport.
that's probably more of my feelings, that Newport and the island was sort of separate from Providence.
Yeah.
You never heard too much about Providence. Secana Point would be kind of a long trip to go over there. That was another Sunday afternoon ride,
Oh, is
maybe
it?
to go to Secana Point.
Uh-huh.
See if they had any swordfish on the dock over there. And that was, of course, all country, Adamsville, things like that.
Okay. Well, I think we've done a terrific job. So I'll turn it off, and then we can. Yeah, that's the
You're not
kind of.
gonna do- It's not on now.
Yeah, go. All right, this is June 15th,
Yes.
and we're continuing the second day for the tape. I've got a little bit on this, so that's why I don't have to say who it is. Okay, we're going to go into this some specific topics as they occurred in Newport, and to get personal recollections of those. I'm going to skip World War I and go right into the summer colony. And what we're interested in is the change in the summer colony. And first of all, do you remember what it was like in Newport during the heyday of the summer colony, or do you think that your memories relate more to the time that it was going down a little bit in terms of importance?
Well, I would say that I can remember some of the better times of the rich people, like the Arthur Curtis James estate with the rose gardens. And
Now, is that the Swiss colony? Is that
well,
what
it
they
was
call
part of the Swiss Village.
Swiss Village? Yeah.
That was a summer evening's drive,
Uh-huh.
to go around the drive and go through the Swiss Village.
That was open to the
Yeah.
public?
Yeah, it was very nice. But at the top of the hill, before you got to Fort Adams, there was a gate there,
Yeah.
and it was like probably the gates that they had in Europe. There was a rope that you would pull, and the gate, I think it swung up.
Mm-hmm.
If the gate was open, you could go in, and you drove where the alcohol center is now.
Yeah, right.
And,
Where Edge Hill is.
Yeah, and I think whether it be, that's Manas's, where Edge Hill is, and whether the Swiss Village belonged to I think the Swiss Village belonged to Arthur Curtis James. And you went in, and there was a pond on the right with geese and ducks, and then you went around a winding road, and there were cottages that resembled cottages in Switzerland, I imagine, because the they were very nicely made, and there were sheep and cattle and bulls in them. I remember getting chased by that bull in the pen when I was over there with my friends going through the field. And there were pigs, herds of pigs. They chased us.
Now, this was a private estate?
Well, as far as I know, it was just something that Arthur Curtis James maintained. Quite a few men worked there. I know some men that worked there, maybe a little older than I am, but a painter that I used to know worked there. Told how little he got paid and how many hours he had to put in to tend the cattle. And you went out on the exit was, no, I shouldn't know the name of the road, but the exit come out, on another road. I can't think of the name of the road. But it was very.
Could you walk around this place, or was it just?
Well, we seemed to stay in our car.
Yeah.
Whatever car.
Except when you were over in the field with the.
Oh, that was many years after. That was on some hunting expedition, maybe. And I remember escaping that herd of pigs.
Oh,
they
herd
really
of
came
pigs.
after us.
No.
They were big, yeah. But that was very interesting, very well kept up. And even in the 50s, it wasn't there anymore. But the cattle, there was always cattle in those fields. They go over towards Hammersmith Road. I don't know, there may still be something there today, but it was an interesting place just to walk through in the 50s. But it really it was very sad to see that closed down. But Arthur Curtis James had a very large estate, and then he had his square rig sailing ship, the Aloha. Everybody knows about that, but he kept that in the harbor, and he had a landing right next between Bonnie Crest and Beachbound, and it's still there today, and it's called James's Landing. It was a very narrow road that you just room enough for one car that went from Harrison Avenue down towards the harbor. When you get down the bottom, there was a big metal turntable. That may still be there. The car drove onto the turntable, and then you push the car around to reverse direction. So it was a great place to go for swimming and hanging around with a bunch of kids and get on that turntable and get it as fast as we could get it going around. Well, now the estate next to Bonnie Crest was called Beachbound. And my friend Archie, he's gone, he's dead now, but his father was a superintendent at Beachbound. And I got to know Archie in Cary School, and of course I got to know him more and more, and then I'd go over to his house, and everything was elegant over there, because they lived in the superintendent's quarters, and that was a
But now, was that a separate house, or was that?
Oh, that was a separate house, yeah. The estate was bordering right on the harbor, and at that time it was owned by Mr. Ripley, who had several daughters and a yacht called the Elfrida, and during the summer there would be the captain from the yacht. He lived upstairs over the garage, the houseman and the chauffeur. I knew all these people, and because I spent a lot of time over there. Sometimes I'd sleep over there, and as a young boy, the next day we'd go fishing, Archie and I.
Now, was he your age?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that was a pretty good sized estate. And they had a skiff. They had skiffs down there that we used. We used to go eeling at night. Archie and I take the skiff and a flashlight, and he'd row, and I'd spear eels down at Brenton Cove.
Yeah.
Then we'd change places, and his father would like the eel, get a lot of eels. Go down in Brenton Cove, around by Fort Island, by the old mule barn. So that was a go. They had the yacht, the Elfrida, and they had several. Sailing was a big thing with the Iowa Yacht Club and the rich people, and there were several classes of boats that these people would race during the summer. The S boats and the Parashore 15-footers. They were all around Ida Lewis. And I remember the yachts in the harbor, giant yachts, the Corsair, the Winchester, Vanderbilt's Winchester. That was another thing to do in the evening. Take one of the skiffs from Ripley's
Yeah.
and row out with 3 or 4 friends and row around these yachts and look in the portholes and things like that.
Would you ever do errands for the people who were out on the boats, or they had their own staff to?
But they were really elegant yachts.
What about the? I don't know if they were doing it then, but the summer colony involved in polo and golf and Bailey's Beach and all of that. Were you aware of this at all?
Yeah. I remember seeing polo matches, but I don't think that was the really rich people. I think there was a polo club. They held matches out at Aquidneck Avenue and Green End Avenue. There was a big field out there. I remember going out with my family a few times and watching a polo game. But no, I remember several of the rich estates and.
Probably. Well, at the time you would really be aware of it. The Depression had started. So that you were 7 when when the stock market crashed?
Well, we lived on Hammond Street then, 1922.
Yeah. Do you remember the mansions being boarded up?
Oh, no, it didn't seem to affect the mansions.
No?
No. I don't think it bothered them. They seemed to just carry on. Of course, maybe when you got towards the 40s, maybe they were starting to change. Maybe the fact that they had to pay an income tax, that might have had something to do with it. The Depression was hard on the working class, the working people. A lot of them were unemployed for long times, and what was there then? There was no Social Security, no welfare.
Right. Yeah, someone told me they can remember with some of the mansions that apparently there was trouble, that people would come around wanting to sell some wonderful things from the interior, silver and so forth, for next to nothing. You say a nickel, but no one even had a nickel to buy the stuff. And do you remember any of that at all?
No.
What about other people who? Did you know anyone else who worked on the estates? No, you mentioned your grandmother.
Yeah, she worked as a
Now,
cook.
how late did she? Until what year do you think she worked?
I would say to almost the middle 40s.
And at that time,
40s.
she went down to Princeton and
Yeah.
to live with
Well,
her.
no, she still lived in Newport till maybe the 50s and then went down to
Yeah.
Princeton, but she was
But
probably,
she worked until the 40s?
No, I don't think she worked as much then. Okay, she might have
Yeah.
worked for slightly more affluent families as a few days a week.
Yeah.
She would be engaged with some family to cook for.
What about the fancy balls or parties? Were you aware of these at all?
Oh yes, when at the Ripley estate, the daughter had a coming out party around 1938, 37 maybe. Oh, they had a giant tent put up. I remember being over there the night of the party. I think my friend Archie, at that time, he could drive. He might have helped out parking the cars, but it was a tremendous affair. Caterers, all, food and drink, and lasted well into the night. That was her debut, I guess you'd call it. Right?
Yeah. So I know it was another world from what you knew and what I knew and what most people knew, but was your feeling, do you think, towards the estates and so forth, fascination, or just took it for granted or didn't care or?
Well, the fact that we grew up living around them, or when the people went there walking through their grounds, maybe we just sort of took it for granted.
Yeah.
But when I worked for a contractor in 38, 39, I worked on a lot of these estates. Walk-in closets, I worked over there a lot, down in the gardens, goofing off up on the roof all day for several weeks during the summer, watching the aircraft carriers coming in, and sort of knew that there was going to be a war. Oh, I worked on a lot of the estates, Van Buren's out Gray Craig, cold days out there, fixing the walls and things. Van Allen's, what later became Bruguire's, she was a very famous, very wealthy person. You wouldn't dare speak to her, really. She ran a real high-class place. I mean, the footmen were all dressed up, and she'd sit at a big table and have the servants wait on her and all that.
How do you think the mansions and this summer colony group are different today from the way they were in the 20s and 30s?
When the older rich people died off, their sons, daughters, heirs seemed to lose interest in keeping the places up. And a lot of them rapidly declined. Either they didn't have the money or they didn't have the interest in living that way. And that was the start of some of them being boarded up maybe part of the summer or all summer, and then eventually being made into apartments.
So it's less lavish now, or just?
Well, there are a few today that are pretty well kept up. That are, well, Mrs. Young, where I work, that's very well kept up. The grounds and the chauffeurs and housemen and maids. There's not many that are that way today. They've all been, well, Bruguire's or Van Allen's, that's part of the college now.
Yeah.
Not even an estate anymore.
Yeah. Or then the Preservation Society has taken over quite a few of them. Why don't we go on, or we could spend the whole time on this subject. The Fall River line. Now that ended in 1937, so you would have been 15 then. But what do you remember about the Fall River line?
Oh, I can remember a lot about that. That was another thing to do in the evening. Some summer evenings was to either drive or walk with my parents down the square someplace and walk down Long Walk and watch the Fall River line come in, and it would be coming from Fall River on the way to New York.
Yeah.
And we would try and guess which one it was, the Priscilla, the Commonwealth, and to watch that boat with all the lights tied up and see the dock handlers hustling around, running wheelbarrows and hand carts and loading that boat up with fish and produce and things going on the way to New York.
It was
would
quite
be
a
late.
sight.
It would be maybe 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight. We would be, as a young boy, standing there watching it, and we had to stay, until it finally cast off. And my father he went to New York several times in connection with the cotton factory. He went to New York to purchase machinery or see about orders or things like that. I never was on them, but and it was another thing was to go around the drive and sit in the car and watch one of them coming in or going out. I guess the Commonwealth was the biggest, and it was a fixture. There was always one or two of them seemed like it was tied up at the dock down there. You could see it from Kings Park with the black stacks and the white superstructure.
Did you ever go on board even though you...
The only time I went on board was when I was going to high school, and they were up for auction, and just as something to do, to go down there and walk around the decks and staterooms. I can't recall too much of it, but I would say that's the only time I was on board. Of course, a lot of people in Newport, a lot of tradesmen worked there. Carpenters, boat builders.
I mean, down in the...
down at the yards.
Yeah.
Maintaining
Right.
the boats. Then there was the Mount Hope, which was the Block Island boat. That was an elegant looking boat, much larger than the one today. It had what they call a walking beam engine. I mean, remember being down Kings Park watching that go by, blowing that whistle about 11 o'clock on the way out to Block Island. It left from Long Wharf, not Block Island. I might have been on that, but I think I was so young I don't remember.
What about, say, after school? Would you and your friends hang around at all down by the...
Oh, we might. Oh, yeah, it was on the way home from school, walking all the time. I might go down the docks, go down the Long Wharf and look around, down the freight yard.
When the line stopped, I guess that came as a big surprise to people. Were you affected in any way, or was your family affected in any way when that stopped?
No.
How do you think that Long Wharf area and the Point were changed as a result of the line's demise?
Well, the boats were towed away for scrap, I guess, and less and less activity down there.
Yeah.
And then the Navy moved right in and took it over. That was a fleet landing. So they went right back up to a busy place again.
Yeah.
All the sailors coming off Liberty would come in with the Liberty boats to Long Wharf, where the old Fall River line was, and then they'd head into town and depart again late in the evening.
Did any of your neighbors work for the steamship line that you know of?
When I lived on Hammond Street, a friend of mine, his father, was a ticket agent there, and I remember going down there maybe on a lunch hour or something from John Clark's school or a Saturday,
Yeah.
and seeing him there selling tickets. And that's the only one that I knew that worked there.
What about people, visitors who got off the boat? Were you aware of those at all? Were they?
No, I don't seem to recall it. Like today, you see the visitors getting off the Block Island boat. You might notice them, but
Yeah.
in those days, no.
Are there any other particular memories that you have about that Fall River line? That you, before we go on to the next
No, it
one?
would mostly be that memory of the nights down there, watching them load.
I am so resentful of the fact that I never went on that line. I don't remember it.
It was the big steamer coming in slowly from the north and edging into the dock, and the men throwing the lines and all the bright lights, and then the tremendous activity loading that boat up with handcuffs and things like that.
What do you think? You mentioned fish. What else do you think they took to?
It seemed like lots of cartons, boxes, and barrels that would be loaded on. And then to watch it sail with all the lights on and leave the harbor.
A beautiful sight. Okay, the Depression. Now, the other day we mentioned some things about the Depression. Do you think that Newport was as hard hit as other areas of Rhode Island or New England, or?
Oh, I would say so. Unless the torpedo station might have helped out, being a federal establishment. People may have, maybe lots of people kept their jobs if they were working
Yeah.
there. My father worked through the Depression, but a lot of people did. But it
So was
was,
the torpedo station really active in this period? Or was there,
Yes,
between the world wars, was there a real dip in activity?
I can't say
Yeah.
after the First World War, but I imagine, I think it seemed to us that it was an active place while we were going to school, while I was going to high school anyway. And it was a place that a lot of people had hopes of being employed there.
The WPA projects, were you aware of these at all?
Oh yes, I remember that. Right across the street from where we lived on Old Fort Road, the last house on Old Fort Road, there was an abandoned quarry which was sort of reactivated, and WPA workers would be over there breaking up rocks. Something to do, I guess.
What about the 40 steps? Do you remember that being built, or any of the other projects?
Well, it's already built, of course, but I remember going down there a lot.
Yeah.
That was another thing in the summer evening. A lot of the help. A lot of
From the mansions, you mean?
yes, a lot
Yeah.
of the help from the mansions would gather there. Not a lot, but and they would have some instruments like an accordion or a violin, maybe a drum, and they'd have a little social gathering there, dancing.
Down on the rocks there?
Oh, no,
Or up on the...
up at the top,
up
at the end of Narragansett Avenue, there's a level cement platform
Right,
there,
okay.
and that's where they would. I remember going down there, maybe sitting in the car with my mother and father and watching this activity.
What are your most your strongest memories about the Depression? It sounds like your family, your father was working, and so you got by. There wasn't a lot. That's my impression from what we talked about. But what stories do you remember about troubles that other people had?
Well, I think we had enough troubles ourselves, even though my father worked. That I know there was several Christmases in a row where there was a subdued affair. I mean, there was maybe a little book or an orange in the stocking. It was just difficult times. Life wasn't too easy in those days. There was no central heat in the houses. I remember my mother doing the wash at that kitchen stove, which was wood and coal, with a big oval wash bucket, stirring the clothes with a stick, and hard work, and hanging the clothes out in a bitter cold winter. It seemed like the winters were worse in those days. There was no heat. There was no heat in the room that the children slept in. There was only that one stove in the kitchen, and there was a parlor stove that, a coal stove that maybe would be in the coldest weather, that might be kept going all the time. But the only
Did
way
you boys all share one room? Or
Yes. What I remember where we lived in a tenement house on Hammond Street, that we all slept in this room, and it would just pile a lot of blankets on. Didn't seem to bother us. Everybody got by all right.
Yeah. Yeah, you also mentioned you ate a lot of, was it mackerel?
No, blackfish chowder.
Blackfish chowder, yeah. Yeah, what about vegetables? Did you grow any of your own vegetables?
Well, no, there was no room to grow any
Yeah.
vegetables there.
What about when you were out at Old Fort Road? Or was,
Yes. Well, I would say the Depression was over, almost over then. That would have been 1935.
Oh,
when we moved
right.
there.
Around this time, supposedly there were rumors that the torpedo station was going to be closed. Do you remember that at all?
That would have to have been in the early 30s, because I think the government realized by the mid-30s, from 35 or 36 on, that things weren't going too good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people thought that,
You mean in terms of the impending war?
yes.
Yeah. Do you think that people thought that the federal economic policies helped Newport at all, or was it a matter of they helped someone else, or they didn't help that much, or?
Well, I remember when Roosevelt was running, he had what was called the NRA. What is that?
The National Recovery Act?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember workers, women mostly, coming to the door with pamphlets and explaining what the NRA was. And I guess being Republicans, I don't know whether we held out any hope that it really would change things, but I can remember all that. I can remember the repeal of Prohibition. I can remember a lot of stories about rum running.
We're going to get into that. Well, do you think that people afterwards, the people you knew or your family, were nostalgic at all about the Depression after they got through it and things had really turned around and sort of, well, things weren't so bad, or we made do and we pulled together and we survived, and sort of remembered some good things, not good things, but...
I would say yes. It was something to talk about and even joke about when things were better. Especially the Blackfish Chowder, we still talk about that today. Some of my
Yeah.
brothers and yeah, everybody survived.
And there was no disgrace or sort of in scraping by because everyone else was
No.
doing the same
Everybody
thing.
else was doing the same. No, it wasn't a disgrace. No.
And you were expected to sort of look out for yourself. You weren't. You weren't used to the government sort of stepping in.
No, I was just going to bring that up. Look at the vast difference today where people, maybe they don't intend to, but it seems like a lot of people that's a way of life for them, that they depend upon the government to support them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in those days, there was no help. Maybe there was a welfare agency, I don't know. But if there was, people would probably be too proud to accept the money.
Mm-hmm. What about the church? Did your family's church, did the church help in any way?
Oh yes, I think they helped a lot. I think I remember vaguely in Sunday school, the superintendent asking if any families had any extra canned food or anything to bring in. And in the theaters, that was another thing on a Saturday, to ask mother for a can of soup and go to the vegetable show. And they had ash barrels at the entrance, and the admission to the theater on a Saturday was to drop whatever you could into this barrel and go into movies.
Huh.
It was
And then this would be given away to
that was
people
all
who were...
collected for the needy.
Yeah,
Now, that had to be in the 33, 34,
yeah.
early 30s. I remember 1928. The Zeppelins coming over.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. The Los Angeles. Mother told me that Los Angeles is going to be here today or tomorrow or something, and spending half the day out in the yard looking up and then finally seeing it going over.
Well, the Prohibition. you said that you remember some stories about the rum runners.
Well, it's just that some of my friends had, maybe their father had something to do with boats and things, and I remember down the beach seeing these straw casings that would have been around the bottles. It was a woven straw material, and they were, that's from on the beach, and that was the story amongst us kids. Oh, that's from a rum runner. But I guess there was a lot of it done here.
I understand there was a lot, and I understand that the boats had a very distinctive, the motors had a very
Yeah.
distinctive sound, so there was no question as to what kind of a boat it was out there.
That's right, and down at Hammett's Wharf, where the showboat was, that was a collection of old timers that hung around down there. A friend of mine, his father had a schooner down there called the Minerva, and there was a couple of men that really lived on it, and he used it to go out fishing. But that's where I heard a lot of stories about rum running as a 12 or 14-year-old
Yeah.
boy, and certain boats being pointed out that by the shape of them, somebody would say, well, that was a rum runner. And one of them was supposed to be famous. I think it was called the Black Duck, which was supposed to be very fast.
Well, there was one, I didn't even get out my notes, that with the Coast Guard intercepted these guys, and there was a shooting.
Yeah, I had heard the story. Well, some of these men probably told me that they heard the machine guns out off the shore there.
I was gonna see if I thought I had those notes somewhere that gave the name of that.
Well, without mentioning any names, my father knows of a landscape contractor that was sort of involved in it. Nobody would know him now even, but my father told me this, that he was involved in it and that he transported this contraband liquor in his truck by covering it over with manure and taking it up the Fall River, or wherever he took it, and then nobody stopped to check the truck.
That's great. And did you hear the stories about the dollar bills that were torn in half as a system of verifying that you were delivering the right stuff, and as a way of
No, I never heard that.
assuring that you would get paid later? What about speakeasies? Were there many stories about all the speakeasies?
My father mentioned that. I think I asked him that, after we grew up and everything, and having a beer after he moved up to Massachusetts. I think he said he knew of several that, I would say that as a young man, my father didn't drink very much at all. But he did know of some speakeasies and where they were and how to get in there.
No. Do you think that, based on what you heard, that there was a lot of sympathy with the rum runners, and it was just sort of a joke, this whole thing about prohibition?
No, I guess I was too young. I don't see.
What about making home brew? Did you hear much about
I
that?
heard about it, but I never saw it.
Yeah.
I can remember the signs on bumpers of cars, repeal the 18th Amendment.
Yeah.
And when it was repealed, I don't think I understood what it meant, really.
Mm.
I lived on Hammond Street then.
Now, where were you when the hurricane of '38 arrived in Newport?
I was in Rogers High School on Broadway next to and it was just a rainy day and maybe a little windy, but nobody had any idea that a terrific storm was bearing down on us.
Now, your family was living on Old Fort Road
Yes,
at
we
the
lived on
time?
Old Fort Road, 101.
And did you walk back and forth to school?
Mostly.
Yeah.
Well,
this was September 21st,
Yeah.
and so can you tell me what transpired after you got out of school? Did they let you out of school early? Or?
I don't think they let us out of school early because school got out early anyway, 2:15.
Yeah.
Whether I walked home or not, I don't know, but I remember winding up.
Okay. So you were coming home from school.
And I don't remember whether I was walking that day or not, but I wound up with Billy Douglas, and he had his mother's car. And the thought was amongst all of us that there would be a great surf running. There would be something to see. So there was 3 or 4 of us. I don't know. Norman, maybe Bob Silcox. Anyway, we got in Dougie's car, and I don't think we went through the Creek Road because that flooded over there. It probably went down Carroll Avenue to the end and turned left and up over the hill by Crossways, and when we came down around the bottom, we realized that something was really wrong because the surf was coming right across the road, and the whole central structure of Bailey's Beach had been moved slightly. There was no, it was frightening to see this and to see those tremendous breakers coming in, and knowing we immediately had to turn around with that car before we got trapped there or something. And I guess eventually.
I mean, it was even for kids your age who are used to.
We've been through several storms. They call them limestone. Yeah. That's all we thought this was, another fall or September storm. So it was back home. I guess he had to get his car back home. Then my mother said something about the chickens and get battened down things, but it still wasn't even thought of that this was to be a hurricane.
Yeah. Right.
Now along came 2 other companions who said, let's go down to see what it's like down by the lily pond. So we went down by the front of the lily pond and then through what we call Bannon's Woods. And walking through those woods, the trees were really, would be a very dangerous place to be, but we didn't think of it. And when we got through the woods, we come out on Carroll Avenue, and there was a tremendous breakers coming right across the road between Hazard's Beach and the Lily Pond. And we went slightly towards Bailey's Beach where the ground was higher, and actually walked out a ways towards Cushing's, what we call the gully, to see what was happening to Gooseberry Island. Because one of my friends said he didn't think the house was going to stay on Gooseberry Island. And we couldn't even see the island. It was just one massive breakers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the colored cook perished, and the house wound up strewn all over the place. It swept right over the island completely. The only thing that was left was the cement water stand that they had there, a tank to hold water. But we probably should never have been there. And then it was back home, back through the woods, I guess. The wind was so terrific that we had to really believe that it was a hurricane amongst ourselves. We'd never seen anything like it. When I got home, oh boy, my mother, where was I? The chickens were blowing all over the place. Lucky a friend came by, the chicken house tipped over, feathers were being blown off the chickens, and we almost lost some of them. And why did I leave and why didn't I stay? Well, there were no lights on. All the power was out. And my father, I guess, was detained down at the cartoning factory trying to salvage things, so it was pretty late when he got home. And it was just, a weird happening. Dark candles and...
Did you go down to the Thames Street area that night?
No.
I mean, you were grounded in terms of your mother allowing you out, or you didn't want to go out, or?
No, we didn't. Never occurred to us. It was too late then anyway. It was dark.
When did you get power back?
I can't remember, but I would say it was probably a week. And the next day was the walk down the beaches, see what
To
had
see what
happened
had happened?
with my companions. And you just couldn't believe it. Everything that was there the day before was wound up in the lily pond or someplace. The bathhouses from the Viking Beach and stuff strewn all over the shores, and Gooseberry Island swept clean.
Did you know of anyone else who was killed? There were quite a few people in Newport who were.
Yes, well, a lot of people, I imagine, were killed down at Easton's Beach.
Yeah,
They sought refuge in the large cafeteria building there, and across the way from across the road there.
I understand that one of the most impressive things was the destruction of the trees.
Yes, the trees were large trees were knocked down on all the estates, and there must have been a tremendous job of cleaning up in those days. The lake
Getting a lot of traffic out here. Oh.
I can't recall chainsaws days.
Yeah.
So how did they? Everything was by axe, and in fact, my brother Eddie worked down at Hill's estate, helping out clearing trees.
Now, did you not have school for a few days?
I think we were out of school for several days with no power.
Did you get any employment because of the hurricane?
Not that I recall. No.
What about looting? Did you hear any stories of looting?
No, I can't recall. I don't think there would have been any looting down in my end of town. I don't seem to recall going uptown for maybe a week after the hurricane to see what happened up there.
Yeah. Did you say the other day you helped your father down at the cartoning factory?
No, not at the cotton factory. Several weeks after the hurricane, I remember my father bringing home boxes of his own personal tools, machinist tools, that were all rusty. And after school, with steel wool and oil and emery paper, I'll help him to clean these tools up so they could be saved.
Yeah. What's the most memorable recollection you have from that 38 hurricane?
Maybe seeing the Jamestown ferry way up high on Jamestown. Seeing,
Now, how did you get over there?
well, you could see it from the boat. Maybe seeing a sport fishing boat that we had sort of admired before. I think the name of it was the Bonito. It was an elegant offshore sport fishing boat, and there it was impaled on a piling on one of the docks, with the piling going right through the hull and up through the deck. And then the papers were full of, magazines and papers were full of pictures of fairly large vessels across the road up near Barrington and places like that. The merry-go-round rolling into the beach. Gradually hearing stories from some of your school chums who were over that way, or who saw more of the hurricane in their district.
Yeah. Did it change your life in any way, do you think?
Yeah, we got a lot of wood to build a new chicken house.
Oh, yeah? Did
A
what?
lot of people salvage
Yeah.
a lot of this lumber from the bathhouses and things
Yeah.
like that.
And anything else that that people picked up from the beaches, or was it just the lumber?
Mostly, I would say, it was
Yeah.
mostly lumber. Unless there might have been instances of people finding boats and whether they had to return them or not. I know there were a lot of canoes washed out of Bailey's Beach, and whether some of the Almy Pond boys latched onto them, I don't know. But there were several oars and things like that maybe later.
Now, were you an Almy Pond boy?
No, I was a Lily Pond boy.
You were a Lily Pond boy. Now, what was the difference between the two?
Probably 3/4 of a mile.
I mean, the
No,
difference
it's
between
just-
the boys, just where you tended to go?
It was just a different group of boys
Yeah.
that hung around over there. Mustard
Did,
Nolan was in charge of the Army Hunt.
who what?
Mustard Nolan.
Oh. Was he someone older than you, or
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
And
tougher?
there was a group over there that hunted and fished and trapped over in that area. They had a club
Were
house.
are these ponds public property, or?
Well, Woolly Pond today has several houses surrounding it, whereas when I was a young boy, they were actually building the houses that were there, the two estates,
Uh-huh.
blasting and stone cutters and things like that. But now the Almy Pond's the same way, it's surrounded by houses now.
Yeah, so you access is what, just from the Ocean Drive then?
Well, Woolly Pond, I guess the only access now is from the Ocean Drive. Maybe part way down on
Yeah.
the west side, you can still get in.
In terms of storms, and did going through this hurricane alter your perception of September storms? Or?
Well, I guess we all realize how powerful the ocean can be, but the general thought was that it was just some freak happening that would probably never happen again, which of course isn't true. Because we had other storms that were almost as bad.
44, 54?
44, I was overseas. 54, I remember that.
How do you think that Newport was changed in any way permanently because of the 38 hurricane?
Well, of course, Easton's Beach was a loss. That was,
That never came back.
you know, maybe some of the estates suffered so much damage that they probably gave up on them.
Yeah.
But the beaches seem to be built right back up
Yeah.
again. Bailey's Beach, Viking Beach, they seem to start right away reconstructing.
You mentioned a little bit about the torpedo station and the sense that World War II was coming on, and you also mentioned, I think before the tape started, how times were different then in terms of people's sense of patriotism. Do you want to say anything about this, how you think Newport felt as a military sort of town?
Oh yeah, Fort Adams was a going place. There was always soldiers. The Fort I might have ridden on the Fort Adams bus several times going over to see my friend Archie. Soldiers were common to see them all over, and of course Newport being a big Navy town, there were sailors all over the place, but nobody, I think everybody sort of looked up to them, at least I did, and thought that the war was coming, and it seemed to get stronger and stronger, but
The harbor must have been quite a sight in those days with the number of ships out there.
yes, the number of ships kept increasing, and then when they started building anti-aircraft platforms on Goat Island, I remember going sailing with some friends and watching them constructing these things and thinking to each other, you know, that something must be happening if they're putting anti-aircraft guns to protect Goat Island. And then when the ships were painted with the dark gray and dark black and camouflage pattern, that was another thing that...
Now, what about the submarine net? Wasn't there a submarine?
Yes, there was a submarine net that, right by Auckland clauses, it with huge buoys stretched right across to Jamestown. I remember being right there. We worked over at Organ Clauses and watching them open the gate. They opened the gate in the morning. There was two net tenders that were anchored permanently that control the gate. And it must have been a big thing to put that there with the tide racing through all the time. But in the morning, there'd be several tankers or freighters lying outside out towards Brenton Point, out to sea, waiting for them to open that gate, and then they would come in.
I understand that. Also, I think it was up when the Fall River line was still running. I think someone told me that, and it was quite a maneuver for those big boats to get through the opening. Now, maybe that's misinformation. Yeah, maybe it was later than that. I don't know.
I'm thinking of the submarine net around 1939.
All right, the Fall River line ended in 37,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
I don't think that was
No, okay. And you knew a lot of people who worked at the torpedo station, or?
Well, a lot of my friends' fathers' families worked there. My father didn't, of course. He worked at the carting factory. But, well, my brother, that seemed to be a great thing. He had a car and a day off now and then, Saturdays off.
He was affluent because of his job?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Seemed like a good job.
Yeah.
And
Now, do you know what he did there?
I think he had something to do with tool making or drafting.
Now, he would have to go down to the government ferry landing and take
Down
the...
Yeah, down the government landing, get on the ferry and go over to the torpedo station. My father eventually did work there.
Oh, he did?
Yes. After the cartoning factory, he worked here and there. The Boston Navy Yard, that's when he got transferred from the Boston Navy Yard down to the torpedo station. Just
So it was considered a good place to work, or
well, as far as security,
Yeah.
employment, yes. The pay would certainly be better than working out in the state.
yeah. Now you were home for a year after Pearl Harbor. It was
Yeah.
a year before you went. Do you remember the security measures taken in your neighborhood or your home in terms of safety?
Well, they had right up in back of our house, up where Rogers High School is now, they had a fairly large Army installation. It was called Battery O'Shea, and it was anti-aircraft and I think coast defense guns. They had ammunition bunkers and quite a few soldiers. And Brenton Point, the old Budwong estate, was another establishment as a sort of a lookout, officers' quarters.
Was it scary for you and the age that you were to think of war, or did the feeling of patriotism override, you think?
Well, I think the general feeling was that if America had to go to war, that we were on the right side, and that it was sort of your duty to become involved in this conflict,
Yeah.
without question.
Yeah.
The only scary thing we had, I wouldn't call it scary, but I mentioned Archie and I going eeling, and one night we had the skiff from Ripley's, and we were rowing around Beacon Rock, and we were down in the Brenton's Cove, and we were coming back up by the mule barn, and all of a sudden a sentry hollered, "Halt!" And we heard the rifle click, the bolt, and he said, "Who are you?" or, "Come ashore." So sure enough, we had to row ashore, and the sentry ordered us to march with his gun up to the guardhouse, and we were questioned quite lengthy about what we were doing and who we were and things like that, and eventually they let us go. But there were cases of Well, there was always the thought of saboteurs landing on the coast.
Yeah.
And it happened, I think, down on Long Island. Well, at that time we were doing a lot of fishing at night. And we'd be out, mostly Archie and I would be out offshore, around Gooseberry, over by the tea house. And we used to laugh about it because we seemed to have no trouble at all, leaving and landing and doing anything we wanted. Coming in on the beach late at night with a skiff, and nobody challenged us or anything. But there were sentries patrolling the shoreline, Coast Guard.
What about covering windows? Did you remember doing that?
Well, I remember the blackout. Yes, I remember the tests they'd have. I used to go up on the hill up where the high school is now and at the appointed hour and just watch the city darken down and see if I could see any lights. It was pretty effective. I remember going over I had a car then.
How did you get a car?
Well, my brother, I was working then. My brother Harry and I, cars were a big thing. We didn't know how to drive a car when we were kids. Borrowing your brother's car or something like that. The car I learned to drive was actually a Model T. We all went down the creek road and down through the old quarry, learning how to drive. But having a car at that time when the blackout was here, I remember going over, my oldest brother was married then, Frank, and he lived on Paradise Avenue. And I was just called him up, maybe I was going to go over and visit him one night. And driving that car with the parking lights on down by Easton's Beach, I couldn't see where I was going. Just crawled along. I thought I was kind of, goofy because, but I didn't know what. I thought I'd better not put the lights on because you weren't supposed to.
Yeah.
It seemed like a long trip to go over Paradise Avenue with parking lights.
What about rationing? Did you?
That was. Well, there was gas rationing. We had tickets. I think there were ways around that. Whether
in Rhode Island, I'm sure there was.
I guess the effective part of rationing happened while I was in the Army. I didn't have to worry about it. But there were coupons for butter and I don't know what else.
Yeah. What, do you have any recollections of what, say, Thames Street was like on a Friday or Saturday night?
Oh, yeah.
During the war?
Well, that's when we first started going up and trying to get a beer here and there. We were underage probably, but
yeah.
It was really jumping. Sailors all over the place, Marines, soldiers. Thames Street was very lively. The Blue Moon, the Bohemian Gardens, and
do you remember many disturbances?
It's Tuesday when June 26th. Is that right?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And this is tape number 3. And our first subject is the Newport Jazz Festival that lasted from 1954 to 1971. You were here then. Did you go to any of the concerts?
Well, no, not really. Being that I never was that much interested in jazz. Music in the swing area, the big bands, I sort of went along with that. I liked that. And in the Army, when the PX and the jukebox would be going continuously, and it would be String of Pearls and Glenn Miller.
Yeah.
I liked that. But jazz as they played it, it just didn't interest me. So all it was a big mess.
Yeah.
So
how were you affected in any way personally during the years when they had it here?
No, I didn't live near Freebury Park, but people that did live near Freebury Park were affected.
Yeah.
And I remember the riot. I was down on Memorial Boulevard in that evening, and it just seemed like there were too many people. The crowd was just getting out of control, and they were, drinking and going in and out of taverns or restaurants, especially on Memorial Boulevard. And well, I guess I went home before the real riot started, but I guess it was pretty serious.
Big crowds are scary. Do you think that it was a good thing to stop the festival after 1971?
Well, for my part, I guess I would say yes. For the merchants and restaurants,
might not have been so good. I just was not interested in I wouldn't even go to one if somebody gave me a ticket, so just didn't interest me.
Well, I was over in Jamestown during all those years. I never came over here either. I wasn't interested. How do you think the city handled the disturbances? Do you think they did?
Well, I think it sort of took them by surprise.
Yeah.
Because I remember being down on Memorial Boulevard and there was a police officer. Well, he was a lieutenant or something. He wasn't in a uniform. He was in civilian clothes. And I can't even recall his name, but he told me, I was just standing there watching people go by in big crowds, and he told me to move and keep moving, even though he knew me.
Yeah.
And he seemed pretty agitated. He seemed pretty concerned. And I guess it was Connie Moore that got in touch with the city solicitor. People saw that something wasn't going right, that it was getting out of control. This is a story I heard.
Yeah.
The Connie Moore called up the city solicitor and says, "You've got to get going and do something. You've got to."
Now, who was Connie Moore? Is
Oh
it-
well, Newporters would know him. He was
Yeah.
a lawyer
Oh.
and made a lot of money. And
Was
I guess
he connected with the jazz festival at
Oh
all?
no, he'd be dead against it.
Oh, I
probably.
see. Okay.
But I guess he had a lot to do with running the city. Other Newporters would probably know.
Yeah.
Old timers. I guess he had a lot of influence. And maybe some of the rich people got in touch with Connie Moore. I mean, he was a lawyer for a lot of the wealthy
Yeah.
people. And he settled estates and things like that. He had a large collection of furniture. Nice furniture. I mean, he went in for the real thing. Got
Yeah.
it in Townsend and, I've been in his house and worked. The shop I was working in at that time did a lot of work for him. He had a large silver collection. Connie Moore, he had a lot of influence in the city. Some people say he ran the city. And then
Yeah.
again, he had his bank down there. Of course, it was the Newport National Bank, but people call it Connie Moore's Bank. And,
Is he still living, or is
no, he died maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. He took over the LaForge cottage up on what's called Equality Park West.
Oh.
It's on the corner of Pelham and, well, I guess that street is Equality Park.
Huh.
It's right, it borders, it looks out on Equality Park.
Huh.
A large house.
Okay, well, let's go on then. Let's forget the jazz festival. The 1973, when the Navy fleet left and sort of everyone was taken by surprise. Do you think that was a loss or a gain for Newport, the fact that the ships left?
Well, at the time, I suppose it was quite a loss. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people had to move. Civil service employees were affected
Yeah.
quite, either they were transferred, that meant selling their home and moving out. Myself, never having worked for the Navy, no, it didn't affect me.
It didn't affect you, but in terms of the city, well, there were a lot of houses on the market
Yes.
then, and the
The
real estate
market.
went
That was the
way
time to
down.
buy a house. They probably should have
Yeah.
bought one.
That's what everyone says now. And what ways did the city change after the fleet pull out?
It might have slowed, well, it did, it slowed down a lot. A lot of the sailors, the ships were gone from the piers and the sailors were gone. So the city was quieter for a while. I guess that's the period in between, then maybe that's when the developers started looking around, shortly after the
Yeah.
fleet left. And then there were other projects that were going to come here. The Prudence Island was going to be made into a hoof and mouth disease. Do you remember that?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Well, that was going to employ a lot of people. Well, it never came to anything. I guess the people on Prudence Island didn't want it, or they objected to it. And there were other things that kept cropping up. Industry was going to move in. People had high hopes that that there would be jobs. But apparently, it all worked itself out. Newport got along without the Navy.
Yeah. Did you know many people who lost Navy-related jobs?
Not offhand, no, but I know it's true that they did.
Was your neighborhood affected in any way? Were there many people who moved out from your neighborhood?
What year was this now?
73?
Gee, I was probably living right here in back of the shop at that time. So that would be this neighborhood right around here.
Yeah.
No, I can't recall.
We know that the Navy still employs a lot of people, and the schools are very active over there. And there's an impression that a lot of Navy people retire in this area. Are you of that opinion also?
Well, yes. I would say in relation to my work here, working on furniture, that even with a limited military presence here, it made work for people in related trades like refinishers and things. Navy families were constantly being moved. And when they moved, they arrived in Newport and they had all kinds of damaged furniture, some of it.
Yeah.
And they would call various shops in Newport to come over and make an estimate on repairing them. And some of my other shops that I know of dealt in that almost exclusively.
Huh.
I mean, they got a lot of their work from repairing and refinishing damaged furniture.
That the Navy damaged in the process of moving. Oh my. Why do you think that a lot of Navy people do retire here?
Well, I'll say that they're stationed here for 5 or 6 or 10 years. I guess they like it. They like Newport. Maybe they have friends here, and they like the beaches, the scenery. So they decide to stay here.
And the Navy hospital and the Navy commissary and the
Yes.
Navy. Okay, so it sounds like you're of the opinion of everyone I've talked to so far, and that is that when the Navy pulled out, it was a big surprise.
It
and
was, yeah.
And it affected people negatively, but the city has survived, and maybe in some ways is even better off than it was in terms of the kind of Navy presence here. There's not as much trouble with the sailors, and the city has found other sources of income, although we'll get into that too. Do you remember when the Newport Bridge was under discussion? Now that opened in 1969.
Well, I remember the construction. Oh yeah. Even before that, I remember the Jamestown Bridge. The building of it.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not so much the construction of it. I guess I didn't get over to Jamestown quite that often, but I well remember the night that the bridge opened, because some friends and I went over there. Is that something you'd want to talk
Sure, yeah.
about? Well, Norman had a Model A Roadster.
Now this was your friend.
One of my
Yeah,
friends, yes,
yeah.
and 4 or 5 of us were going over and watch the opening ceremonies of opening
Oh.
the bridge. It was in the evening, I think. So you get on the ferry, and 2 or 3 of us would get in the rumble seat, and they'd close the rumble seat down because it would cost less. It only cost so much for the car, and it was
Each passenger.
25 cents for each passenger. So once the car was on the ferry, you climbed out of the rumble seat.
Oh,
And
that's
we
funny.
went over there and watched this. I guess I think they had fireworks, if I remember right. But it was quite impressive to watch the.
Yeah.
And we might go in, test, and have a beer, even though we were underage. It was I can remember it.
It
quite
was a
well.
big historic event, yeah.
Well, the Newport Bridge. Oh yeah, I remember all that.
What about the location of the bridge? Do you remember a lot of fussing about that?
Yes, I guess it was the Navy had a lot to do with it. The carriers have to come in and out of here, and it had to be high enough to accommodate them. And first it was going to be maybe touching Rose Island, or part of it would land on Rose Island. Then they had several locations. Maybe the Jamestowners didn't like where it was going to wind up on the island of Jamestown.
There's a lot of trouble now because of where the
With the new bridge?
Well, yeah, with the new bridge, and people are just really panicked, the ones who live along East Shore Road, because the question is, what kind of access are you going to have to the bridge, and that road has to be widened, and, so it's a big hullabaloo over there.
Oh,
I saw the plans for the new bridge. They have two designs. One is all concrete, and one is concrete and steel. And one is uglier than the other. They're just awful looking.
Well, with a new improved bridge, say 4 lanes wide, as compared to the one we have now, that's just 2 lanes, that's going to throw a lot of extra traffic onto the island of Jamestown. They're going to be dumped right onto Jamestown, traveling at a high speed, and how are they going to get across Jamestown to link up with the Newport?
Well, now everyone's unhappy because what they should have done was, when you go across the Jamestown Bridge and you're on Eldred Avenue, and put the Newport Bridge right at the end of Eldred Avenue, instead of going down a couple of miles along the shoreline of Jamestown. But from what I hear, there were a lot of the Newport businessmen wanted the bridge to come close to Newport, so people wouldn't bypass Newport. It would make it easier for them to come into the city and spend their money. Now they're sorry they did that, but that's the way it was. Well, you mentioned that you used to take that ferry boat fairly regularly. But
Oh, the Jamestown ferry, yes.
Yeah, and that was for recreational purposes. You mentioned going over and spending the day in Jamestown
Yes.
with your family, and so. But most of the time, you were a foot passenger, right? You weren't
On the ferry. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
you didn't take
Yeah.
the car that much. What about going out to Beavertail? Did you do that very often?
A few
Good
times.
fishing out there,
I know, Beavertail Point.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of times when I arrived back in Newport, kind of newly married and looking for work, that I took the ferry over there a couple of times and looked in the shipyards for work. I remember walking out to Beavertail Point
Oh, really?
and just for, something to do for the day. It was
Yeah.
kind of a long walk, and then coming back and taking the ferry back. I think on other times I remember going with my mother. It was just something to do on a nice summer's afternoon,
Yeah.
to get on the ferry, go over to Jamestown, not get off, and then come back again, just to spend some time on the water, just
Yeah.
for a ride. It was nice.
And I remember you mentioned picking blueberries over there.
Up near the golf course, someplace up in there. A lot of Newporters went over there to pick blueberries.
So do you miss the ferry boats? Or in
I would
terms
say, yes. Maybe that's a better solution than having the bridge. They ought to take the Jamestown Bridge down, put the Saunderstown Ferry back.
That's right.
And that would keep a lot of tourists out.
Do you remember any problems with the ferry system?
Yeah, coming back from fishing, if we went over trout fishing over the other side, you had to sort of time your arrival in Jamestown
Yeah.
to get to meet the ferry. And sometimes you got mixed up. It was either on the half hour or on the hour. Or if you did get there say you went trout fishing on a Sunday over in Arcadia and over those places, and you left to get back, and there's rows and rows of cars all lined up to go on the ferry. Well, you had to get, away at the end of the line, and it was a long wait, so we'd all go in Taft and start drinking beer, and somebody would have to keep an eye on the car, or here comes the ferry, and then you'd run out and get in your car, and you may not make it on that ferry.
Yeah. Then you may have to wait for
You
the
have to
next
go back in Taft again for another hour.
Now, where was Teps? Is that?
Right there by the ferry land.
Oh, okay.
You're Jamestown, you ought to know that.
Well,
Taft Spa, everybody went in there.
yeah, okay.
Wait.
Is that along the line where Pitchers is and where the ferry passenger waiting area was?
Oh, on the south side of the square there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe it'll show up.
I think there was a drugstore next to it.
Hayward's? Or that was a paper store. Well, in any case. So, were you glad to see the bridge come then, or was it just sort of inevitable, or?
No, I kind of think the bridge would help a lot in a way, but I really like the ferries.
Now, as I understand it, one of the unusual things about that ferry was that for a long time, the town of Jamestown ran it. It was their ferry system. And I've heard that Newporters kind of resented this, and I don't know if there's any basis to that or not.
I don't seem to recall anything like that. Newport and Jamestown Ferry, I guess that's what they called it.
Which was your favorite ferry boat?
Well, probably the government class. That seemed to be everybody's favorite.
Yeah.
And then there were probably earlier ones, but that's the first one I can seem to recall. On one of these other interviews, I mentioned that my brothers used to go over to Saunderstown on the West Ferry, which I never went on, but I know it existed. They call it the Saunderstown Ferry.
Yeah. How do you think that the Newport Bridge changed Newport?
Probably brought a lot more traffic into the city. It did. It had to.
Mm.
A lot of people wouldn't bother waiting for those ferries. They'd go around Providence. Say they were going to the Cape. It was a lot shorter to take the ferry, but maybe they thought, oh well, maybe they'd be too late or didn't want to bother with it and keep driving. Oh yeah, the bridge definitely brought a lot of traffic into Newport.
I've heard some people say they wish they had both, kept the ferries and also had the bridge. Okay, that kind of takes care of that, unless you had something else you wanted to.
Well, there was the Saunderstown, not the Saunderstown, there was the Goat Island Ferry that left from, there were two of them. It left from Government Landing, which was kind of nice. Lawns all trimmed and everything, a little waiting room. And hundreds and hundreds of workers would be going on the shifts.
Now, was that free
morning.
for the people who work there?
Oh, that was for Goat Island, for workers, yes. So the few people that lived there, and the naval officers lived in some of the houses out there.
I like those big houses that were on Goat Island with the green. I remember them as being green and white.
I remember the day they set fire to them. They were razzing them and demolishing them.
Yeah.
There was one on the point there, and I happened to be down Kings Park, saw it go up in flames.
Oh.
But then, as the war progressed and more workers were over the top of the air station, they started what they call the North Ferry, which left from the steamship yards or Briggs's Wharf. So there were two ferries going to Goat Island. It landed south of the lighthouse.
Where did all those workers park, or did they walk to the...
Well, there were a lot of parking places down Market Square. I think the government, there was a parking lot by the Government Landing. Of course, I would say, a lot of Newporters either walked or their wives drove them nearby, and they got out. Maybe they didn't bring their cars.
Okay, well, let's go on to restoration and redevelopment then. And when were you first aware there was a need to change some of the deteriorating parts of the city?
I don't think there was a need.
Okay.
That's my idea.
See, the question is slanted in terms of whoever wrote the question. What about, say, around Broadway and West Broadway?
Well, that's true.
You want to get that, and I'll turn this off?
I suppose.
Okay, so back to Broadway and West Broadway.
That was sort of run down, It probably is a good thing that was rehabilitated. But for the rest of the city, the way Thames Street was, with all the docks going down there, and West Pelham Street, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. I thought it was fine. Now what have they got? Well, the city wanted tourists, and that's what they have now. Is that good or bad? Just makes a mess in the summer. You can't park any place. It's difficult to even cross the street, especially last summer with the America's Cup here. But I can't see any big advantage in America's Cup Avenue. twists all around. A lot of the Newporters don't care for it. In other words, the city was modernized and developed, and is still being developed, and they're putting houses up on every available lot, big tall buildings. Can't see the waterfront from Thames Street anymore.
Sure.
Well,
Well, you also have, well, with the time sharing, there's a concept that a lot of people question in terms of the true interest and commitment of the people who buy into those in terms of the city's future.
and it's moving all the way down now, lower Thames Street, getting down towards the Fifth Ward. Well, I guess it's already they're going ahead with a building right opposite Wellington Avenue, between the gas station and Specs Bar. They're putting up a big shopping center, stores and offices in a big lot there. And then there's a lot of talk about the old gas company works. I guess eventually there's a hotel going to go up there.
I think so.
So the only way to see the water is to walk down Kings Park. Maybe they'll build something there too.
Well, what about in a perhaps more positive vein, the appreciation of the historic value of a lot of the buildings in Newport? Do you think that this is something that, if people were living here and didn't really realize the value of some of the buildings?
Yes, that's true, yeah. In fact, I guess several colonial buildings were probably lost. I know they were, I mean.
Yeah. Now, do you know anyone who was displaced because of either, of tearing down old buildings that weren't valuable, or of having to get out because someone said, well, now this is a house we want to buy and fix up? Do you know people who were displaced?
No, I don't seem to recall any, but I'm sure it must have happened. Yeah. Oh, what Doris Duke did in restoring a lot of these buildings is probably, undoubtedly it was a good thing to save, save buildings. Of course, a lot of them aren't quite that authentic. In other words, they took parts from some building up in Massachusetts and incorporated them into a house, but well, it did improve a lot of the streets, like Denison Street right up here. That's up down near the bottom. Look at the Whitehorn Museum. I remember that as a rundown, dilapidated rooming house with a butcher shop on the. Oh, first it was a roofing company in the back with the big tar buckets on Denison Street.
No kidding.
Oh, what a rundown area! But there was a meat market there, and on one wall they had pictures of steak, big like a mural with hams and steaks and the name of the meat market. That would be on Denison Street. It was in bad shape. So, and look at it today.
Yeah.
So, undoubtedly, that was a good thing.
Did you work on any of these houses yourself?
No, I don't. No, I didn't. But I know several of my friends that did work for Doris Duke, either in the mill or as carpenters.
Were those good jobs to have?
Oh yes, yes. In fact, she put a mill right down. The mill was right on Denison Street for several years. And a good friend of mine worked in the mill, making sash and doors and
for the restored homes.
For the restored homes.
Now that's the Newport Restoration Foundation, right? That's her baby, so to speak.
Yeah.
What about the Preservation Society and their work?
Well, that was more in preserving some of the mansions.
Yeah.
Another good thing. Yeah.
Now, do you know anyone who worked on any of those projects, or who works there now?
I would say yes. I did a little work occasionally for, I worked on some chairs down at the Breakers as you go in the entrance there. I had them in my shop here. I knew the director. And
Is this the man who killed himself?
No.
No.
The director at that time.
Oh, okay.
He's still a good friend of mine, and I've done work through him. Not an awful lot, but I would say it was a good thing, yeah, that they
preserved, or let the public see the breakers and Marble House and things like that.
Well, the attendance figures are just phenomenal in terms of the people who go through there. What about there are a couple of private ones like Hammersmith Farm and Belcourt Castle? Have you been involved in any of their
No.
projects?
Now, Hammersmith Farm, I remember as auction clauses, where I worked for a contractor just before the war,
Yeah.
the first year of the war. I remember being up on the roof, goofing off all afternoon with Duffy Hetland and watching the ships come in and out. But it was, it was far different then,
Yeah. That's a gorgeous view you get from that spot.
especially up on the roof. Well, there's another estate that it was a shame to see go was the Arthur Curtis James estate on Beacon Hill.
Now
And,
what happened to that?
Well, it was closed down and boarded up, but an awful lot of grounds went with that estate. Went all the way over to the Creek Road. He had a big, what they call James's Garden, or sort of surrounded by woods. Nobody would know it was there now, but it was a large vegetable garden.
Huh.
And well, James's estate was a big place. They had horse and wagons, and it went on both sides of Brenton Road, the Rose Garden, and at least two superintendents that lived there year round.
Now he was the one that when he died, everyone who'd worked for him got something based on the
I think it was
longevity.
$1,000 for every year they worked there. Yes, that's true. That's the place. And after, I don't know how long after he died, that it sort of closed down slowly, and the house was probably boarded up. Well, young people, not so much Newporters, but young people seemed. Oh, I know what happened. It was sold to the Catholic diocese.
Oh.
Yeah, and there was a caretaker living over in by Hammersmith Road in a garage apartment there, just down below the estate. Well, these young people were found out about it and that they could get in the place, and they were coming down in groups and practically living in it. And they started vandalizing it, stealing the copper. Then there was a fire and a little bit of the roof burned, and they were going to do something about it. Well, say the Preservation Society, maybe they didn't have the money, but if they could have bought that, it would have been a great attraction. Because it was high up on a hill. You had a weather observatory there, and a little small octagonal stone building with a flagpole, and that's where he kept track of the weather, I guess, as a hobby. Well, then I guess the police got after the vandals for a while, but they came back, and sure enough, one night they set it on fire and the whole roof burned and fell in, so they had to tear it down.
Isn't that a shame?
A big estate, but I think he even had a private residence for his doctor going on the hill, going down to the fort on the left. I remember my father going around the drive, saying, "There's where Arthur Curtis James' doctor lives." Well, I guess it was called Vedemar. It was torn down when the Alcoholic Center took over.
Wow.
It wasn't too long ago that it was torn down.
Huh. That's interesting. See, I think I asked all the questions there on this subject. What's your earliest recollection of the America's Cup series? Now that started here in 1930 was the first one.
Probably almost the first one. Thomas Lipton was Irish, I guess, wasn't he? And all the Irish people in the Fifth Ward, I think they were kind of rooting for him.
Oh, yeah?
And I remember when I lived on Hammond Street as a very young boy, some of the Irish people saying, "I hope Tom wins today." And I remember the races.
Maybe not so much what year was the first one?
Well, the first one in Newport was in 1930.
Certainly I must have remembered. I would have been 8 years old.
Yeah,
But the following one, which was 34,
I think so.
oh, I remember
Or
that quite well.
33 or 34, I'm not sure.
I remember all the boats. I remember going with my father over to, that was, when the cup races around with the J boats, which were tremendous boats, big, huge boats.
Yeah.
And that was the thing to do when maybe my cousins came down from Massachusetts or so, and we'd go over to Fort Adams, walk out the stone dock where the lighthouse, where the light and the bell was, and watch all these huge yachts going out, plus the cup contenders, and rounding Fort Adams to head out to sea. I remember the shipyards hauling the boats out. I remember the Yankee, one of the contenders, up on the ways, and it wasn't wood, it was bronze. The plates, the hull was bronze, and there they were, sailors polishing that bottom with, the harbor was full of cans of bronze polish.
Is that right?
No, there was a certain name on those cans, but they'd be floating all around the dry dock there.
That's
They
fascinating.
polished that bottom so it would gleam, so it would slide through the water smooth
Yeah.
again. So I remember the Yankee.
What about the
Oh.
Ranger?
Oh, I remember the Ranger and the Rainbow and Lipton's yachts, the Shamrock, the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th or whatever it was. Plus all the huge palatial yachts that went with these cup races. But the crowds didn't seem like the crowds were so bad as in the recent cup races.
Well, I think people just got interested, the common man just got interested recently. What do you think the main contribution to Newport was of having the cup races here?
In the 30s, at that time, I don't think it benefited any average citizen.
Yeah.
How could it? It benefited the rich people, probably. They had their
Or
parties.
the merchants or the...
The merchants, yes.
Yeah.
The fruit, the big markets in Newport,
Yeah.
certainly they must have done quite well. The liquor stores, sure, that would have benefited them.
Was your life ever affected personally by the cup races, by having them here in terms of employment or anything?
No, I was quite young then, of course. No, except that it was an attraction. It was interesting. Boys, my age were all interested in sailing or boating, and so it was exciting. It was interesting. I remember my mother being interested in it, to go over and watch the yachts go out.
So are you going to miss them?
I guess being an American, I kept saying that I hope Australia wins and takes it out of here, so that things will be a lot easier, but I suppose finally, when it looked like we might lose, I changed my mind. But now that it's all over and they did win, which America had it so long, that
Yeah.
I'm really glad that all the crowds will be down in Sydney, wherever it is.
What about the future of Newport? What do you see happening? And what would you like to happen?
Well, I guess I would like to see it calm down or quiet down. I mean, the crowd, Newport is so different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. It's just, a lot of Newporters are complaining about how difficult it is to do anything in the summer, to drive any place, to park. You can't get a parking space. This year is not quite so bad, I will say that, but last year was impossible. The average Newporter couldn't even go out for dinner. Where could he go? Every place was crowded. There'd be 1 or 2 hours wait to get in the restaurants. The crowds of people walking up and down Thames Street. You might as well stay home. That's all you could do. I didn't even drive my car much all summer. It was so difficult. Newporters couldn't find a place to park any place. You have to leave your car home and walk uptown if you wanted to go to a dinner or anything.
So are you concerned about where this development's going to end?
Well, yes, yeah. People are making money, yeah, the developers are making money, and it's changing Newport a lot. But then again, maybe it won't arrive at that. Supposing prosperity diminishes a little, supposing there's trouble with the economy, maybe a lot of these people will be left holding the bag. There'll be a lot of empty houses around Newport, or hotels and things.
Could happen. Yeah, like in Jamestown, there are a lot of, there are new condominium stores right downtown. One of the 6 is rented, is occupied.
Well, how do Jamestown people think about their island over there? What do you think about development?
There's a lot of concern, and they've got one time sharing place already, that Newport Overlook. That took everyone by surprise. They were originally condominiums and they didn't sell, so this Inn on the Harbor that's down here owns that one also.
Where in Jamestown is that located?
Right when you go over the bridge, you look down on it on your right.
Oh, I know it is.
And people I know call that Pew View because it's right next to the sewage treatment plant. And the Bay Voyage Hotel, which has been operating, had a nice restaurant and had rooms, it was an inn. The guy who owned it took in some partners and they were going to make that into time sharing.
Is that right by the ferry? No,
No,
it's up the road a ways.
up the road a ways.
Yeah.
And the last I heard was the 2 of the partners and the one with the money pulled out, so that thing is sitting there empty. And the Bayview Hotel is sitting there with like a big fire trap.
That's the one right by the ferry.
Yeah, that's the one right in the corner. Yeah.
That was always a landmark. You could sort of see that from
right.
Kings Park.
Well, it's open. It's got a bar in there in the summertime, but the rest of the time. And I've heard that the guy who owns that, he'll sell it for, I don't know what price he's asking, but if people want to go through and see it, prospective buyers, he's charging $200 just to show it.
Are any of the rooms rented or occupied now?
No, it's a fire
just the
trap,
bar.
and you can only use the first floor.
Gee, it's wonder that some kind of a developer doesn't put his eye on that.
I know.
Would Jamestowners want that?
Well, I think they would like to see something done with the building. It's an eyesore now. It looks terrible. It's a beautiful old building. That's a McKim, Mead and White design building, and so it's an important landmark, and it's of historical interest. But right now, it just looks awful. There's a lot of building, a lot of concern.
Well,
There's,
Newport,
So I think Jamestown hopefully will learn something from Newport, but who knows?
well, my ideas, should I say?
Yeah, sure.
Newport, of course, a lot of old people like I am probably, that they don't like change. And young people, they're happy to see it maybe, but I just remember Newport as it was even in the 20s, late 28, 29, 30 as a young boy, quiet, almost like a lot of fishing boats down the docks. It was fishing was a big thing here, and the torpedo station was there, but it wasn't that big. And then we had the estates and the different markets and things like that. That's what I remember, and that's what I like. Well, a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't look back. Things we have to have progress, but I still like to think of the old days. In fact, I occasionally talk to my father, and he tells me what it was like when he was a young boy, where he lived. He used to go to his uncle's farm up in Ashby, and his father would put him on the train in Whitensville, about 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and they'd be waiting for him at the station up nearby in a horse and wagon to pick him up and take him up to this farm. And he'd tell how he'd take his shoes off as soon as he got there, and he wouldn't put them on until it was time to go back to go to school.
Yeah.
And
So I like his stories about, he'd take my mother for $50, he'd take my mother to the movies, go in and have an ice cream, soda or something after the movies, buy a pack of cigarettes and still have a dime left.
Well, something that I think that has come through on your tape is really nice flavor of what it was like to grow up here as a boy, and it just sounds so nice. And kids can't do things the way you did it in terms of going off and going camping and fishing and wandering around and have the access to the water and the estates and it sounds like you really had a nice childhood here. And it was
Yes,
a nice place,
I would say so.
and it's a nice place to grow up.
And we still, at that time, when we were first starting to go hunting, had what we would call older men. They were probably, maybe they were 50 years old at the time, or 40, and they would be telling us that, oh, well, the hunting's all through, but now you can't go hunting down Kings Park anymore. And we used to shoot yellowlegs down by Kings Park, or you could shoot ducks, or you could take a lot more ducks when we were shooting, and it's not worth going now, but it was fine for us. But I still think that we had a great time, that we were allowed to do this, to walk over by the drive and go fishing out on the rocks.
Mm-hmm. Now, are there many of your childhood friends who still live in Newport?
Yes. Some of them have passed on, but oh yes, a lot of my friends are still here.
So that says something about you could have gone somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that I'm through with all my set questions, but if there's anything else you think of that you want to preserve.
No, it's just that I still think along those lines that Newport's not changing for the better as far as I'm concerned, but we have to have progress.
Well, a lot of people agree with you, so you must be right. Okay, well, I'm going to